Okay. All right. What's up? What's up? Hey, Jamie, how you doing?
Hey, good. I'm just fine. Very good.
You ready to get this Uncle Burning stream started?
I am.
All right.
The funny thing about Elvis that I just learned was all of their code words and his silly language that they would speak to each other, like all the different baby names and things. So if you don't know the Elvis baby names that we're going to teach you tonight, you're not.
Now listen,
really a
pumpkin.
fan.
Listen, sugar dumpling.
No, it was like Satinin was one of them. And like teeths were teeths. This is how they talk to each other.
All right. Look, y'all, we got Jamie with us tonight from Jamie Hanshaw's channel. Everybody here is already subscribed to you, but if you're watching this and you're not sub, go to Jamie Hanshaw and check out our Peter Pan streams. We did 2 Peter Pan streams, and last night you did a great stream on Taylor Swift. That was really good. And everybody, if you can hit the thumbs and like and share the stream. I don't know if I'm freezing here. I might be freezing up. I keep freezing up on my end. I don't know if I'm freezing up for anybody else, but the audio should be good. And I can't figure out what it was. It's probably this red Elvis light I have over here. But we got all of our gear. Jamie's got her Beehive Priscilla haircut tonight and her TCB shirt.
Yep.
And I got my TCB necklace in here somewhere. There's my TCB. And I got my TCB lapel pin, my TCB ashtray. and my Elvis jewelry on. And so tonight we're covering the new Sofia Coppola movie Priscilla, and then Jamie's going to also talk about the Elvis book, the Elvis and Priscilla book, right? Elvis and Me. And then it's one of the only Elvis books that I don't have. And so so you're going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about all the Elvis books. I got all the Elvis books and my wealth of Elvis knowledge here, and then I got a big old stack of stuff to talk about right here, and then Peter Gerolnick's book, Careless Love, and then the Jerry Hopkins book about Elvis, the story of Elvis. So we're gonna deep dive into this movie right here, the Sofia Coppola movie. And before we begin, everybody, I've done Sofia Coppola movie analysis with Chase Haggard. We did Lost in Translation, and this is kind of at the tail end of a bunch of movies that I've done on this channel. So check those out, and I've done a bunch on my friends' channels, Real Cooter Brown, Digital Minefield, and Church of the Eternal Logos, David Patrick Harry. So let's get into it. Shall we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready.
All right. So first off, what did you think? What's your immediate takeaway from the movie?
The movie?
Yeah.
Well, we saw the movie. I read this book a couple years ago, and then I forgot everything in it because we did a show about it, and that's how it goes. And so we saw the movie, and then I just reread this real quick in a couple days, and it's almost page by page. So if you have seen the movie, you've almost read this book. I mean, they might have just taken the script out of this because it was almost scene by scene match.
So, okay, so I read a couple articles from that were mentioning Lisa Marie's attitude towards the movie and what she was thinking about it, and she wrote some pretty hardcore emails to Sofia Coppola about this, saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing to my daddy? Why are you doing this? And her take on Lisa Marie was, she was saying, well, Lisa Marie wasn't her obviously her take is different. I mean, because it's her book and it's about her. But
Lisa or Priscilla?
I'm sorry, Priscilla. Priscilla was Lisa Marie was saying that Priscilla had a skewed take on the thing. And why are you going to tear her down? Now we can see that obviously because Lisa Marie's the daughter, and she had a pretty complex relationship with Elvis, and we're going to get into that and what I think about all that. But I also read, I mentioned this to you, I read an autobiography of Priscilla's boyfriend after Elvis died, this guy Michael Edwards. And I said, it's funny because I sent an excerpt to you and you said, this guy doesn't seem very smart. And
well, wait, was he the karate guy?
No, he got into karate, but the karate guy was Mike Stone.
Oh, okay.
That was the guy that she was seeing while Elvis was alive, and he was not happy about this. And reading this book, it's about a 300-page book. Y'all, you can read the book in about 45 minutes. It's honestly, it's written. I can't even describe how the book is written, but it's very creepy. The guy was a total creep, and it makes you wish that Elvis had been alive when he knew the guy was there. Because then he would have had he would have done something. But at least Priscilla was, I think, pretty obviously. It's a complex story, and the movie dives into it, and it's pretty uncomfortable actually. Because
that guy. Yes, I remember talking about him on Wikipedia. Like the first thing you come across when you bring up his name is like, and Lisa Marie accused him of being creeper stepdad-ish.
Yes. And not only that, but he says that in the first chapter within the first few pages. He says that. He mentions that. He admits it. He admits it himself in his autobiography. And it's crazy because I did a stream on Zoolander and Bret Easton Ellis's Glamorama and the sort of monarch, controlled model assassin sort of archetype that we see in movies and in literature. But this guy was a male model, and it's like remember in Zoolander, like when they find the computer and he's like, it's in the computer. And they're trying to like open the computer to like find the files.
Yeah.
It's like that guy had written a book. But it's also really disturbing because the guy says, like, for instance, he'll say, I kind of looked like Elvis, and people always tell me that I had a dark look, kind of like Elvis. And here I was going out with Priscilla Presley, and now we're sleeping in Graceland, and I'm sleeping in Elvis's bed. I basically am Elvis now. I'm Elvis.
Yeah.
It's very weird. It's totally psychotic.
Like Will Ferrell playing a Elvis character.
Yeah, it is. But the parts about the other things are so it's very uncomfortable. And I think that Lisa Marie, was like wishing her dad was there because this guy is such a creep, but that's kind of ironic considering the movie. And so this is uncomfortable in the movie. So what should we do? Should we dive into the movie? And
well, I will just like go through this book and then because it's basically the script, and then that will probably prompt you to say things about the movie.
Okay. Let's do it.
Okay. So the first thing I had underlined, which was also ended up being on the back cover, it says, "He taught me everything: how to dress, how to walk, how to apply makeup and wear my hair, how to behave, how to return love his way. Over the years, he became my father, husband, and very nearly God." That is Priscilla Presley's quote about Elvis.
Oh boy.
So here we are. It's 1956. She's still a little girl, 14, um, living in Germany when they meet.
Right. So she's living in Germany because so Elvis was born in 1935. She's born in 1945. She's 10 years younger.
Yeah.
And Elvis at this point, like, and this is where the movie begins, is Germany, right? And if you've ever seen the movie, one movie that does kind of a good job of this, even though it deals with the same exact thing, which is weird, is the movie Great Balls of Fire about Jerry Lee Lewis with Dennis Quaid. And there's a
Oh,
scene
yeah.
where, there's a scene where Dennis Quaid is, Jerry Lee Lewis, and I've got his autobiography here too. It's pretty insane, but he is becoming big. Like they all went on tour together, and then they had the Memphis Quartet. Johnny Cash was coming. This was all happening at the same time. And then Elvis all of a sudden got called away for military service to Germany, and he was in a tank division in Germany. And this was Colonel Tom was doing this to him. And Elvis, there's a scene where Elvis comes in a door and he's like standing in the dark, and he says, like, "It's your time now, baby. It's your time." Like to Jerry Lee Lewis. and so when Elvis went away to Germany, what happened was he met Priscilla, and then we have this whole thing that happens. And then he comes back, and when he comes back to America, it's the start of the Beatles, and Elvis's time has been bypassed. And then he spends a decade in Hollywood hell, and until he does the comeback special, and then that goes into the 70s. But basically, going away to Germany was this weird thing that Colonel Tom did to him, because he didn't, I mean, I guess he was called up for service, but he could have gotten out of it. It's the biggest star in the world. Right?
Yeah. This makes me wonder if it's some kind of conditioning for later on ops, because he really was interested in like law enforcement and collecting badges and titles. Like you can see all of his like
badge room,
terrorist badges, and like whatever kind of law enforcement. He's like, I need that. I need to be that badge. Like,
well, he was deputy. I mean, he was a sheriff in Shelby County in Tennessee. And there's a story about him later. This is close to his death, but he could not get out of the house. I did an Elvis stream on this later. I mean, about a year ago, you guys, so you can check that out. It's called Elvis Hurt. But one of the stories was, and I have a picture of him in black leather motorcycle cop garb with a helmet and blue glasses, and he's armed. And all of a sudden, the Memphis Mafia was at, they were at Graceland, and they were like, "Where's Big E?" And they were like, "We don't know. We can't find him." And then somebody was like, "I think I saw him drive out, onto Elvis Presley Boulevard on his motorcycle." And he went out and he was pulling people over for speeding.
Yeah.
Like, as a cop.
Story. Yeah.
And so, but he would pull people over. He'd be like, "No speeding." And they'd be like, "Are you Elvis?" And he'd be like, "Yes, ma'am." And then he would sign an autograph and be like, "Don't speed." And then there was another time that he stopped a mugging. he was deputized, and he had all these badges. And that's the story about him going to the White House with Nixon, where he wanted that DEA badge, which is a whole ironic thing. It's a paradox, really, that I guess we'll probably get into later. But conditioning from Colonel Tom.
Yeah, this is the one half of this love story that we're going to be going over, the movie Priscilla and the book. So his personality is so bombastic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so he would have these parties every night at his house while he was stationed in Germany.
Yeah.
And they would go out and procure, pretty girls and fun guys and bring them to the parties. And that is how Priscilla was noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes. And it's uncomfortable in the movie because he's got all of his men there bringing the girl. They're going out and like you said, they're going out and finding the girls like for these parties. Mm-hmm. And one of the girls that they pick up is Priscilla Ballou. whose dad is a Air Force captain. Is he an Air
Uh-huh.
Force captain? I think he's an Air Force captain. And they come to her and they say, "Would you like to go to a party at Elvis Presley's house? Do you know who that is?" And she's like, "Yes. Who in the world doesn't know who Elvis is?" And she goes, and there's no way around this. There's no, I mean, so I a lot of I don't know how to get into this. It's like people will say that thing about like, well, there was times were different, and it's like not really. Not they, they were, but they weren't, and there's no way around the fact that he's 24,
Mhm.
right? And she's 10 years
She's
younger.
14,
Right.
freshman
It's
in high school.
yeah, I could not I sort of try to
Um,
blank that out.
and so those are, like, really big years too, like,
Yeah.
a 14 to a 24-year-old, that's a lot of experience. So that's why she said he taught her everything. That's all she
Mhm.
knew from when she was a ninth grader. He was a father figure to her, a husband, and a, godlike figure because, man, what an age. Like, there is nothing stupider than a girl in love. And, like, make her 14, like,
Yeah.
that's you can't resist, and her parents obviously couldn't resist saying no.
Well, it's crazy because her dad is outranks Elvis.
Yeah.
But obviously not. I mean, they're in the military, but they go, and it's not even Elvis at first. It's like you said, it's his men who go to him and ask for permission. And then the parents give permission. They give permission for her to get in an airplane and leave the country and go back to the United States and live in Memphis, like at the house. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, yeah, we're gonna track how he charmed him. I mean, and he
Yeah.
made good on a lot of his promises. We're not trying to drag him at all, but it is, I think she to him represented innocence and a piece of home and, like, something that just hadn't seen and experienced all the things that because he was already, like, the most famous person in the
Yes.
country. That'd be like Justin Bieber signing up to go to
He's
war,
he's
like,
he's the most famous person in the world.
yeah.
And I think what's crazy, not to psychoanalyze, but I think one thing that happened even at the very beginning is that Elvis had this vacuum in his life. There's this big hole that opened up in his heart because Gladys died, his mother. And so he's seeking a mother, daughter, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's very weird.
exactly.
And just for people watching, like the only consolation with this is that when is that there was nothing happened until late, like what was it? I guess about 10 years later when they got married.
Yeah,
And that's part of I know that's part of what the book is gonna say.
yeah. So, the first thing about when she had to move to Germany, she said, "We felt lucky to find a large apartment in a vintage building constructed long before World War One. Soon after we moved in, we noticed that all the other apartments were rented by single girls. The Frauleins walked around all day in robes and negligees, and at night they were dressed to kill. Once we learned a little German, we realized although the pension was very discreet, we were living in a bordello."
Right.
So this is where she's living, in Germany when Elvis's guys cruise by and are like, "Hey, want to come to a party?"
Right. And I mean, she wouldn't have even been. I mean, because he broke in 1956, I think is the year that he broke. That he became big. So she's too young for that, right? This is. Oh my god, this is so uncomfortable. It's like there's no way around it. But
I put in 1959, Elvis was 24, Priscilla was 14. So the first whole scene of the movie is them like getting to know each other. He's being very gentle. He's being very respectable because he's placed this Madonna complex on her, almost, right?
yeah, he does say he does go to the parents and they're like, we need to meet Elvis, right? So he comes in and he's like, hey, Mr. Blue, hey, Captain Blue,
Yeah.
and they're
How
they're
do you
talking.
pronounce it? Is it Bolio or Blue? How do you
I
say it?
thought it was Below,
Bolio. I don't know.
Below. I don't know. I don't
It
know how
looks
you
pretty
pronounce.
though.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah. So he goes to so they show the military base and it's Americanized because this is post World War II. Now we're in Germany, and Elvis again is over there for his military service. But what's interesting also is that immediately the drugs come into play,
Mhm.
and she wasn't really exposed to it. I don't know what the book says, but she was not exposed to it in the movie, and from what Elvis, from the biographies of Elvis, until later. But what happened was that when these guys went to Germany and they were in these like Elvis was in like this tank division and they're up on exercises all the time, they're given pep pills.
Mhm.
And so he starts taking speed, right?
Yeah.
And Elvis, and one thing, the movie was pretty true to life in terms of you notice that in all of the scenes with all the parties that there's drinking and there's smoking and it's the 60s and all this stuff. But Elvis is never drinking. He never drank. He was a teetotal. He's always I'm sitting here drinking a Pepsi. But he's swallowing handfuls of pills,
Yeah.
and he smokes cigars, these little cigarillos, but he doesn't smoke cigarettes. And then that's going to lead into the fact that his drug taking is from a doctor. Dr. Nick on The Simpsons comes from Elvis. So he had Dr. Nickopolis,
Right.
who became his doctor. So
Yeah. Yeah, and he would also start faking sick during this time to
yes,
get out of things.
yeah.
And that's what led me to believe that maybe this is possible. This Elvis is Still Alive book. Remember
Oh,
that
that's a classic. Yes.
I'm like, he had that like trickster mentality, like, yeah. But yeah, so there was one story in here that he wanted to get out of like the early morning cold duties where he had to sleep on the ground because it would hurt his voice.
Yeah.
So he started faking sick.
So he's doing the little kid thing,
Yeah.
like he's back at home, and that's one reason why he had Vernon, his dad, who plays a role in the movie.
Uh-huh.
You need to get out of here, honey. This is where we do all the business. That guy, right?
Yeah.
This is where we do the accounting. Which is
So
yeah,
Elvis, yeah, he's the heartthrob. He is also dating this girl named Anita back home, and she's sending him letters, and Priscilla sees these letters from Anita, and thus begins, triangulation that she would always have to deal with, and that ultimately led to, them splitting up.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shouts out to Rachel Wilson at Based Homeschool Mom who
Oh,
drops the super chat. I'll come back to
Rachel
that in
here?
a second. Yeah. Shouts out
I
to
can
Rachel.
only see our Streamlabs comments. I don't know if I can see the YouTube ones. Maybe on my phone.
Yeah.
Okay.
And listen, DM Fuerte says, did Elvis have a handler like Harley Pasternak? Well, he wasn't like Harley Pasternak. His handler was the handler of all handlers, who was
The Colonel.
Colonel Tom Parker. And the interesting thing about this is that most people don't know this, that Elvis is unusual in the sense of other pop stars and music stars, rock stars, because he never went out of the country. So technically, right, he's in Germany. He's doing his military service, but it's U.S. territory, and he's on a U.S. military base, unless he's out on exercises or whatever. But other than that, he didn't leave. He didn't go on any international tours. The only the closest thing to an international tour he did was the Aloha from Hawaii concert. And part of the reason for that is because Colonel Tom was Colonel Tom Dutch? He
Yeah.
wasn't a colonel.
Well,
Yeah, he was.
we don't know because he was the ultimate con man. So he was trying on all kinds of accents before but I think, yeah, you could trace it back to him being Dutch.
Yeah,
And then
and
that reminded me of Goldfinger. Remember I'm so weird, I'm Dutch. Like
he is Goldfinger. Like he that's him. He looks like that, and he becomes. What's interesting about Colonel Tom is that he becomes this sort of quintessential manager who is replicated with later huge stars and bands. So Peter Grant for Led Zeppelin was another Colonel Tom figure. Suge Knight is another Colonel Tom figure. We got this big hulking, big fat man who dominates their artist and is in complete control of their artist. And one of the reasons that Elvis went broke was because Colonel Tom took like at least 50% of the take.
he wouldn't let him have a passport because
Mhm.
Colonel Tom himself couldn't leave the country because he was that sus of a person.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yes, Colonel Tom didn't want anybody finding out that he was not an American citizen and not a colonel, so Elvis couldn't
And his
leave.
name wasn't Tom, and
Yes. His name was Thomas Vandersloot or something, and 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 related to that, did you know that Colonel Tom is suspected to have possibly killed a woman in Holland, and that's the reason why he left Holland and came to the United States and never returned to Europe, because he's Thomas Vandersloot, right?
It's like, I'm from Holland. No, Missouri. Isn't that weird?
Smoking a pancake, ball in a blade, pipe and a crepe. Elvis, we are going on tour for gold. That's why Elvis had all that gold, because he loves gold, Mr. Powers.
Colonel Tom, and like we'll get later. It's making me cry. But he had this like snowman's league that he thought he was the ultimate mastermind. Like
Elvis is big star, but he will never be inducted into Snowman's League of Assassins. It takes gold.
Man.
I don't know. Colonel Tom loves Christmas. What can I say?
And who better to play that than Tom Hanks?
Right.
He actually did a good job.
Yeah, people panned his performance, but I think that it was probably more accurate to her, because he looked comical and he spoke in this comical, even though he was also sinister.
I know.
He is totally
did it perfectly.
Yes. So they're on this German military base, and Elvis is sent over there. And yes, I think this is probably, there's some sort of weird not programming how we normally talk about programming, but some sort of weird programming initiation thing happening. Not just the fact that I think what part of it is that Colonel Tom had him sent over there because he's ingratiating himself and Elvis into the establishment, because part of his fame at the beginning was that Elvis is anti-establishment, and there's we can't show his feet when he's dancing. His feet, he's got on New Balances. We can't show his feet when he's dancing. So they couldn't show him, and so he's anti-establishment, and he starts rock and roll, right? Yep. But then later they have to ingratiate him into this power, and what better way than in the military, right? He's in this military, and then he meets with the president, right? He just walks right into the White House.
Oh yeah. So
he becomes a symbol of America itself, I guess, is probably the point of this.
Well, he got that from he would read this comic, Captain Wonder or something like that. Wonder, one of those oldie Captain Americas, but he had black hair. The comic did, and that's why Elvis wanted to have black hair, and he saw himself as this superhero that could save America.
It's all I can read. Colonel Tom is all I can read. I can't even read the contract. I can just read the pictures. Yeah.
Does Captain America do that? Okay, so this is the man that's trying to woo this 14-year-old girl. Because she also represents this Americana ethos, and he's he was so lonely for somebody from home. That scene where he's playing the piano and he catches that cup. Did you see
Yes.
that? That's true. That's right in here.
Yeah.
That actually happened.
I'm so dialed in. My reflexes are pre-karate stage.
Yeah, it's that speed.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Tweakers can do it. So not before long, he's like, I want to be alone with you, Priscilla. And so she starts going up and waiting for him in his bedroom so they can
He's like, throw a bottle of Yoo-Hoo right in my face. Watch me kick. Yeah. Elvis loved Yoo-Hoo. Yeah. Yeah, so they show me. One thing interesting about the movie up to this point is it's noticeable how how absent of Elvis it is, right?
Mhm.
And so obviously the movie's titled Priscilla. We're watching Priscilla's story, but what Sofia Coppola does really well in this movie, it's weird because this is the complete antithesis to the Elvis movie that came out with Baz, the Baz Luhrmann movie that came out last year. It's the
Mhm.
total opposite of that. That movie's
Oh,
all
good
about,
point. Yeah.
yeah, that movie's all about the flash and pizzazz of Elvis, and the glitter and the music and the performance in Elvis's life, and this sort of stage variation of how we know him. But one thing interesting about this movie is that you walk away, at least I did. I walked away feeling like we don't we don't know who these characters are, and they don't know who they are themselves, and that's part of their struggle. It's alienating. It's one of the most alienating movies I've seen. I mean, especially the alienation of the big thing of Elvis being with her in the first place is completely alienating.
Well,
And that's because he's alienated from himself. He's alienated from the country. She's alienated from her family. They're alienated from each other. And so there's a lot of silence in the movie.
mhm.
There's a
There's a
there's a
lot of
big lack of,
expectations that they both have to live up to, so, like, being the most famous, pop star, he's gotta
yeah,
build up his partner to be ta her image has to be curated as, finely as his own. So he has to take this girl that he finds, like, the potential. She's got the dark hair, she's got the blue eyes that he likes, she's got the look, she's very impressionable, right? She's very sweet, very, innocent.
yeah.
Um, and he, you know, for all intents, he was a gentlemanly as much as, Elvis, the world famous rock star, can be.
Yeah.
He treated her with respect, but there was definitely a daughter father dynamic, and also her to him a mother, because he had, like you said, he had just lost his mother, and she represented home to him, like a new beginning, fresh start basically, but also taking on roles of like maternal nurturing.
Yeah. One of the things ironic about all this is that with so much talk about, shouts out to Rachel, like, and with so much talk about this sort of decadence and decay of society, especially in marital relationships, that Elvis comes at a time when he partly starts this. Like, this is the second half of the 20th century. He starts this kind of, again, this like alienating pre-Woodstock, like rock and roll anti-establishment thing that then becomes co-opted and establishment, but is like sex appeal. It's like pure 20th century sex appeal in a way that had never been seen before. This is like a capitalism at its height. It's like one pop star who's promoted everywhere in the world. Everybody knows who he is. But yet, at the same time, his relationship with Priscilla, he wanted someone, and he says this throughout the film. He's like, I need somebody who's at home. When I come back from tour, I need you at home making some bacon.
Yeah.
Right? He
Yeah.
wants her at home there. He wants her answering the phone. He wants her at home when he needs her. He needs her, to eat with him. He needs the cooking. He needs her, if you don't like the books that I read, baby, this ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
best
and
line in the movie.
this was a stark contrast to all of the women been exposed to in Hollywood, all the
Yeah.
leading ladies and the girls with their own careers in mind and things like that. So she wasn't even old enough to know what she wanted to do
Yeah.
like that. So I think that was another thing that was attractive about her.
So is that part of it? Is that the reason that he liked her from the beginning is that he felt like he could make her into these things before she would become these other things?
Yeah.
Which again is ironic because then she became the other thing, like,
Well,
completely.
that's the thing. Like, if you can build your own fembot, you don't like her because she's not interesting.
Mhm.
Then you go for the woman who actually has her own sense of like who she is and her experience or whatever. But not that he was that crude. He was very nurturing about the whole ordeal. I mean, he came to meet her parents. He like was nervous about impressing them. All of the benchmarks of like sincerity were
Yeah.
there. for him.
Well, he's a southern gentleman, from Mississippi who grew up poor, and so I guess that's part of it, that he wants normal, like Toledo says, yeah, traditional normality. He wants normality. He wants tradition. He
Yeah.
wants a home life because his life away from there is certainly antithetical to that. And another thing that the movie does well is it shows that there's like two Elvises, right? There's one that is um, with the Memphis Mafia and its locker room talk with the boys, right?
Mhm.
And then there's the other, which is like you brought up crudeness. There's no crudeness. He's not crass. He's not crude. He doesn't make innuendos. He's a very sort of straight up Southern fellow when he's talking to the parents, when he's talking to her, when the ladies are around, when his housekeepers are around.
And he always had his family around him, there's grannies and nannies and cook like bakers, and his dad was there with him. So it's
Yeah.
like as wholesome as the number one sex symbol pop star of the world could try and be, he was trying to be that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
He had a lot of family. Yeah. Vernon was his manager, which is probably why there was no money, because his dad was his manager and Vernon was this poor guy from, Tupelo. And then his cousins, he had a couple of cousins who were in the Memphis Mafia, and they were all people that he picked up along the way. They show Diamond Joe Esposito. That was one of his guys. That was a guy that he met in the army. He met a bunch of these guys in the army, and so they were. So there's one thing about Elvis, I mean, that for sure, I think, is that his he kept his masculinity and his masculine image as intact as he possibly could, because he's a singer after all, right? Which is kind of I think he saw it as sort of feminine, he's wearing costumes, he's wearing jewelry, and he's glittering and all this stuff. So he has to maintain this masculine image to override it, to show that, like, you're not going to dress me up,
Yeah.
he's going to be a manly character in the movies that he's in. He always plays the same kind of character in his movies, but it's always a masculine hero who's interested in cars and so I think that was important for his home life as well.
Hmm. So they met in Germany. Nothing happened between them, except innocent laying down and staring at each other's eyes, and this book is very it's written from Priscilla's perspective, so it's all about their lovey-doveyness, which is kind of funny to me. They didn't really portray that in the movie very well. I think they were a little more goofballs than the movie would make them out to be.
Yeah. I think
What do
that
you
was
think?
part of Lisa Marie's problem with the movie, is that it didn't have any. The movie doesn't really show any of the lightness and the fact that they fell in love and they got married.
Mhm.
It's much more that this is some sort of coping,
Mhm.
right? And that she's left alone most of the time. Again, there's a lot of silence in the movie. It's
Oh,
pretty.
yeah, well, we'll get there. This is a
Yeah.
tragedy for sure. I
Mhm.
wish, it had ended differently, because I think that they were as good a couple as any.
Yeah.
So he leaves her in Germany after their initial encounters, right? And
Right.
she has to send him away amidst this sea of screaming fans. And he's like, "Turn and wave to me so I know that you're there." Like,
Yeah. Wait, do your Elvis accent again?
no, I don't know. That's not good.
That was pretty good. he's, he's, he sounds like Woody Harrelson in True Detective. No, yeah, they're in the car and they're going to the airplane, and all the staged pre-Beatles, this is Elvis Mania, and all the ladies are there or whatever, and he gets
He's
out of
like,
the car and leaves her.
"Shh." They're all screaming,
Yeah,
and
yeah. Well, listen. When I go up to the phone, when I go up to the plane, make sure you throw up a blood sign so I know that you represent.
yeah. But I think it was sweet. Like, he gave her his jacket. Oh, there was a story in here about so she had to be shuttled back and forth to these parties, and it was like 45 minutes away. It was like in a town, like next town over in Germany. And one of the guys who was giving her a ride, uh, she had to push him away.
Oh, I didn't know about that. Yeah, that wasn't in the movie.
Yeah.
Did she tell Elvis about that?
Well, it says Elvis lived virtually like a recluse at the base at his little house because there was all screaming fans everywhere.
Yeah.
One particular evening, when either his dad or somebody else he trusted could give her a ride home, there was a guy named Kurt was driving me. I started dozing off. All of a sudden, I felt the road get bumpy. I opened my eyes. What's wrong? I asked. You'll find out, he said, turning his head away. He stopped, shut off the ignition. He
Boy.
grabbed her, tried to kiss her. She pushed him away, struggling. He threw me down on the seat. I started fighting. I kicked open the door and banged the horn, hit the lights, scratched his face, and he finally stopped and gave up
Oh,
and
damn.
took her home.
Damn, that's pretty hardcore.
So this is the kind of things that are happening. Also to Elvis, I mean, he always was armed, right? He had all of his bodyguards around him at all times. So there was like a level of paranoia that comes with this type of fame that is just like off the charts, right?
I guess that guy's lucky she didn't tell him about it.
She did later, I think, because she didn't want to stop like that. She didn't want her parents to know because then they would stop it.
Wasn't Elvis arrested for assault before he was famous while he was a truck driver?
Oh, I never heard that story.
Yeah. He's got a fake mugshot when he's older. He's like, I got all the badges, and now I want to be a criminal.
Uh-huh.
So they took a mugshot, but he has another mugshot when he was arrested. I think it was for assault. But he was, he was a truck driver, in Mississippi and up into Memphis. And we'll get to this later about his reaction to Mike Stone and what he does with that. He's furious. So that's interesting. But I guess that plays into the kind of archetypes, because he becomes like a father figure protector. And there's no way around this to say that this is like normal, but they're living abnormal lives already. Right. And this is part of I'm not excusing it. Obviously, I'm saying that this plays into Elvis's fame. It's weird because it plays into the Elvis fame thing where it's like you said, like he's at home. He can't. This is a dude who even at this point cannot even go outside like to do things, right? Even when he's in the army, part of the problem when he was in the army was he was like, if I'm going to go do this, I'm going to be doing the things that normal people do. And they're like, okay, well, just sing one song. And he's like, I'm in a tank.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do my I can't like sing. I don't want to be doing this, And so no matter where he goes, he always has to play this role of Elvis. So I guess the weirdness surrounds them in this weird light.
Yeah. So like he was living very, like you said, like a recluse there, and the people who were close to him, she noticed that he controlled like everybody's mood because he is the breadwinner, at this point. He's the livelihood of all of this family and friends.
Yeah, right? He's certainly the alpha dog.
And so she says, as soon as he appeared, the room would become silent until he revealed his mood. No one, including myself, dared joke around unless he laughed, and then we all laughed. So what a weird existence,
He's like, you guys see that latest episode of Chippendale's Rescue Rangers? It was funny. And they're like, that was hilarious. Yeah. He loved cartoons.
She said, nights when his mood was calm and peaceful, he would describe his ideal woman and tell me how perfectly I fit this image. He liked soft-spoken brunettes with blue eyes. He wanted to mold me to his opinions and preferences. So there you have it. He was, trying to make a Elvis his wife. Right? Yeah. So, and that's interesting that you titled this Elvis the Other, because that's kind of who he's trying to create out of Priscilla. Right?
Yes. Well, he's an it's fun. It's weird because there are a lot of elements of this. So he's an outsider, first of all, in his own life, because he had a twin brother who died. And so I know that he had constant dreams about his brother. it's kind of like the Johnny Cash story. Johnny Cash had that brother who died in the accident on the farm. And Elvis's brother died very young. So there's kind of two Elvises. There's Elvis himself and then his brother. And the other one is like the dream Elvis that
Yeah.
he sees himself. And then there's Elvis at home, and then there's Elvis in fame. And then there's the Elvis that people see, and then the one that he was. There's the one that the family sees, and there's he himself. So there's always these elements of personae, right? He's always wearing this mask.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Priscilla, who is outside of the normal or acceptable relationships, but he's trying to make her normal. And then they are literally outside the country. They're in Germany, right? But they're also sort of in America. He's in the military, but he's a musician. He's a rock star.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of this is, and I know we're going to get into this with like his spiritual quest and some of the new, and when he gets into the new agey books and all the stuff. My only way of explaining that is that there's nobody around him who is normal,
Right.
There's the semblance of normality, and there's but it's a bunch of sycophants. And
Right.
so
His nucleus is his family / employees. So what a crazy dynamic that makes.
Yes. So he can do anything he wants, but he also doesn't have money. He doesn't actually have money. And then when he does have money, then he spends it all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this weird dynamic. And then when he's searching for he's a Christian, but he doesn't understand how to go about doing it. And so he starts inventing these ideas of what Christianity is supposed to be, like with his new agey books, and he's incorporating Eastern, mysticism into it. And then Blavatsky, right.
Yeah.
And all this weird stuff.
Yeah,
So
layer in
he's
all of that on top of whatever else he's experienced in any military colonel secret hypnosis programs.
Yeah.
Right. And then we can talk about this one if you want to also. But yeah. So he's on these horns of a dilemma. He can have any person in the world he wants, but he wants his Scylla, his Priscilla, his perfect doll. And so at the end of the part of this book where they're saying goodbye in Germany, she said, despite his moralizing, I feared Elvis wasn't always faithful to me. His bantering with some of the other girls at his house made me think that he might be intimately familiar with them. So this is something that would haunt them and their relationship throughout the whole thing. She said, I quickly learned for my own survival not to ask too many questions.
Right.
So Elvis's perfect wife doesn't accuse him of being inappropriate.
He doesn't want her asking him where he's been, where he's going, what he's doing. And part of that is she's supposed to know this anyway, in the fact that like he's going off on tour, right? But he didn't want any questions about it. And I think that it's difficult because it's like, later on, it's like he's off on tour, and it's like you're talking about the biggest sex symbol in the world.
Yeah.
So of course he's going to act a certain way. I'm not saying he's going to go cheat or whatever. I'm just saying that he's charming naturally. He's going to charm people. He lives a charmed life, right? There's this weird aura around him, and people are attracted. I've got this book here by one of the famous Lester Bangs. Lester Bangs was this famous music critic in the 60s and 70s who like he sort of would make or break bands, right? And he was very sort of like he hated the hippie, he hated Led Zeppelin and sort of big 70s bands. And then he promoted the MC5, and he was into punk rock before it was a thing and all this stuff. He hated Elvis. He hated Elvis, and he hated the Doors, and he wrote constantly about how much he hated him. But then there's an essay in there where he says he went to see Elvis at during one of his stadium. I think he was in Vegas. He saw him at one of his Vegas concerts. And he says he walked in the back of the stadium, and he realized instantly why people were obsessed with this guy. He said that Elvis was wearing all white. He was wearing his all white jumpsuit, and the lights were shining and glinting off of the rhinestones. And he got beamed in the eye by this laser reflection. And he says it was like looking at an angel on stage. He was larger than life, and he could see people just rushing the stage, and he understood now. And he said that when Jim Morrison died, from the Doors, when Jim Morrison died, the Doors were playing blues music, and he said the best thing for Elvis's career would be to give up all of his Elvis stuff and become the lead singer for the Doors and just play like a blues tour in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's essentially like who Elvis, and he's kind of right. Like that's who essentially he is. Have you ever heard that song "Poke Salad Annie"?
No.
It's
Sing it.
He says,
if you sing, they'll send you super chats.
Yeah. Send in those super chats because I'm gonna tell you what Elvis says at the beginning of the song. They're playing. Doom, 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 doom. Oh, by the way, Elvis's bass player was also the session bass player for the Doors on "L.A. Woman," Jerry Scheff. So Elvis starts off and he says, "Down there in the South, we got a thing. Everybody calls it poke salad. It's like a leaf or a turnip green. Everybody calls it. Well, that's poke salad." And it's called Poke Salad Annie. And it's basically a song about him when he's poor. All the poor people in the South, they eat this weed, right, that you can boil. And it's just a weed. It's an invasive weed, but you boil it and then you eat it. And it's called poke salad. My mom knows about it from Mississippi. But baby, get your granny. That's what he says in the song.
That reminds me of that song Crawfish. Do you remember that one?
Yeah. How's that go?
Crawfish. I think that one's set in New Orleans.
Yeah. That's one of his movie songs. He hated his movie songs.
Yeah. So yeah, he had the Riz, man. He had the sauce and the drip and the je ne sais quoi, all of that.
Yeah.
He had it, whatever you want to call it.
Do you think that, remember in the 70s when they had like Superfly and all the pimp thing? I think that Elvis is usually accused of stealing that, from like black culture. But I feel like they kind of got it from him as far as the pimp outfits go. He loved wearing big pimp capes and
maybe
canes.
So. And maybe they're supposed to be like Tibetan masters. Like, have you ever seen pictures of like Saint Germain and those weird culty icons they're pretty pimpy looking, like high collars and yeah.
Is this is this the Cleasty? That's not the Cleasty, is it? That's the one that Rasputin was in.
No, I was just talking about like the I Am Foundation. Of Saint Germain and Mount Shasta.
I love me an Edwardian high collar.
Yeah.
I love the Edwardian. Elvis is in there reading Oscar Wilde.
Yeah, but like, so maybe these are like Tibetan inspired because he was reading a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Phone Punk brings up nudie suits. He was wearing nudie suits.
What is that?
Nudie was a fashion designer who like he's the one who started like the 70s rhinestone cowboy thing. All of Elvis's. I mean, remember at Graceland in the racquetball court, they have all of his jumpsuits. They're all called nudie suits. They were made specifically for him.
Okay.
And they have the rhinestones on them so that they will glint off of the stage lights.
Yeah.
Yeah, Elvis was Pim says James Dean rebelled out of cause, Jailhouse Rock, Elvis trying to capitalize on the bad boy image. First of all, the lyrics to Jailhouse Rock are very weird because it's about a jailbird love affair, right? Which is odd. But yeah, Elvis in
but like, what kind of man and woman be jailing together? Right?
Yeah, it's very weird.
And I think the live dancing to that song is a little weird too. Have you seen that?
Yes. He's like, oh.
But like little striped pajamas and stuff.
Yeah. But his early films, like the one where he's a boxer and Jailhouse Rock, I mean, he really was. Elvis was a good actor. And it wasn't his. He could have been, they talk about Brando in the movie. He could have been a Brando or a James Dean, and he was. Jack Kerouac says that the American pop culture trinity was James Dean, Brando, and Elvis, and that Elvis could have had pursued a much more, um, not just lucrative, but a much more like full and robust Hollywood career. But it was Colonel Tom who was was making these roles for him because they were easy to shoot. They were inexpensive. He controlled all the elements of the film, and Elvis just had to get on there and sing these dumb songs. And he did like 30 something films.
There's so many.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many Elvis movies.
Yeah.
And artistically, it was hard for him. Because it's just like kind of the same dumb stuff over and over. Like, beach babe movies and what do you call those? Like surfboard.
Beach blanket bingo.
Yeah. So he wanted to be taken more seriously. And this is the environment that Priscilla is being introduced to. So when he leaves Germany, he has to start right up with his movie career again.
Yeah.
But he's still thinking about her. He's still calling her. He gives it 2 years, I think, and then he brings her out to California to date him.
Right.
While he's making movies. And he is refusing to sleep with her, even though they share the same bed and room and, there's other things. But he's like going all the way for that special time, right? Yeah. Third base only with Priscilla.
Yeah. He's like, not now, Priscilla. I want to read Blavatsky.
Yeah. He says, well, because when she came out to see him, he says, I want you to promise you'll stay the way you are, untouched as I left you. And so she's waited for him to grow up a little bit. And then she goes to see him in LA, and this is the scene in the movie where they go to Vegas for the first time.
Oh yeah.
Right.
When you went to Graceland on the tour, did you watch the video before the super tour? Like there's the one tour where it's like $300. It's the big tour, and they show the video before you go in. Did you see that one?
No.
That one's funny because when you go in, you sit in this room and they start the tour, but it's a video. It's like a retrospective of Elvis. My sister thinks this is the funniest thing ever. Like there's a scene where he's like, now everybody turn to the left. And he's doing that scene from Viva Las Vegas, and Viva Las Vegas was huge, and that's where Anne Margaret comes in, because Anne Margaret was a huge star, and I'm pretty sure they had a love affair. There's no proof of it, like in any of the biographies, but that they had a love affair on set, and then that becomes part of the.
She keeps finding notes, and she figures out this is one of the first times where you see him lose his temper about this issue.
Yes.
Yeah. And she, lost it too of Priscilla. I mean, and when she, had pretty much the smoking gun of the evidence of him and Anne Margaret.
Yeah.
This would be throughout their whole relationship.
There's the scene in the film where he's sitting around listening to music. Right. And he's listening to the various records they're pitching him for the songs in the movies. This was a good scene. And the song is something like, Mr. Snowman or something like that. And he's like, this is shit. I don't want to do any of this. It's all terrible, And then they're like, come on, Elvis, you got to do it. And he goes, Scylla, what do you think about this? And she goes, well, I don't like it. And he explodes. He throws a chair against the wall, and he's like, listen, baby, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to explode.
Yeah, that happened according to this book. Because she said, he'd left Germany a gentle, sensitive, and insecure boy. Through the course of the evening, I'd see now he's mischievous and self-confident to the point of cockiness. So when she goes out to visit him after a couple years more of making movies, getting over his mom, getting his groove back, he's more Elvis than ever.
Right.
Right.
one of the things that happened that people don't really know about this, but one of the things that happened was he had this mansion in Bel Air. So he had Graceland, he lived at Graceland, but he had an Elvis mansion in Bel Air when he was filming all the stuff in Hollywood. And the Peter Gerolnick book talks about how he was a frequent guest at the Playboy Mansion. And the Playboy Mansion
That's the
steam
programming center.
Yes, it seems like a blackmailing programming center, with double mirrors and everything. But I know that he had his own suite that was just his at the Playboy Mansion. Nobody else stayed in it, and it was
Really?
just his. And and when he would arrive, it says in the book when he would arrive, all of the usual stuff with the media, photographing people going to the parties and stuff that was banned, so that he would go there and I think that's part of his. Colonel Tom probably did that. That's part of his image. But whatever happened there was probably certainly used as a blackmail thing.
Yeah. So Playboy Mansion, Vegas. She goes to see him, and they go to Vegas, and this is where he's starting to teach her how to look. So he wants her to dye her hair black. He wants her to put on more makeup. He wants to buy her a new wardrobe. And I thought that scene in the movie could have been a little more. The movie was just, like you said, very heartless.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't leave with the feeling that this was a cute couple, like an innocent meet cute like you do in this book.
Yeah. My overall take on the movie is that I think that it's not a movie that you would rewatch. It's not a continuous movie, but it's worth watching one time because she really does. Sofia Coppola manages to do this weird thing where she is drawing an audience in while at the same time making them increasingly uncomfortable. So we're supposed to be comfortable watching Elvis. It's supposed to be this thing in our mind where, no matter how old you are, who Elvis is, and what generally what the perception of his concerts is, and like everybody wants to be there. But when you're watching him at home, you don't want to be there with him. It's uncomfortable. And you get the kind of feeling that he himself doesn't want to be at the concerts, or that he wants to be there, and that even he's uncomfortable in his own skin. And again, it's this like weird way of like the characters not knowing who they are, and that's part of the alienation in the movie. Also, everything in the movie does that. It's like the color scheme, the color palette, the aesthetics, the silence, the use of music, the way the characters are portrayed, the characterization, the supporting cast. They're all kind of empty characters, but purposefully so. It's similar in a lot of ways to what happens in Ridley Scott's Napoleon, which is a terrible movie that I analyzed, but this does it differently, where you feel like you should know the characters and there's something, but they're alienating you purposefully, whereas that was just kind of nothing.
Yeah. And I don't know how to describe it. Like you said about Napoleon, you're like, and then this happened. It was just kind of one of those movies. Like there was no climax, or you didn't really feel like you had been through a event with them.
Yeah. The scene where she's doing the fashion thing was interesting because, like you said, like he's like, we're going to take you on a fashion trip. But then they bring everything to the house because they can't go out. So then she comes in and he's like, and she's like, do you like this dress? She looks beautiful. And he's like, prints are not for you, baby. They don't bring out your eyes. I don't like prints. I told you I don't like prints. He gets real mad about it.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's something she was complaining about in this book is, he had to curate her look to match his own. He was always going to be under scrutiny, and whoever was with him was always going to be under that same level of like standard look, right?
Yeah.
And then you mentioned, so he had started giving her sleeping pills and stuff, or stay awake pills to stay awake when they were hanging out in Germany, because she would party all night and then have to go to school the next day. So he would give her some Dexedril. What was that?
Dexedrine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then when she would come visit him in California, he one time he gave her too much Placidils.
Yeah.
And she slept for 2 days.
Right.
That was in the movie, right?
Yes. Yeah. So Elvis did this thing, and maybe I'll get into this a little bit later in this, but my sort of I don't know, theory or whatever has always been that the two most famous people in the 20th century really are Hotler and Elvis, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
They're the two people that are lightning rods and that everyone everywhere knows, or especially did in the 20th century. And they both have performative aspects, of their personality. They both are obsessed with their mothers. They both have a Dr. Nick. Hotler had Theodore Morel. They
Mhm.
both dominate their social circles in a way where, like you said, everybody has to laugh at the specific times. Everybody has to, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But also, but also, but also, the main thing is that they both were vampirical in terms of how they ended up living. They both lived
Mhm.
solely at night, and they couldn't live in the daytime because of everything. They're different situations. One is wartime, and the other is this weird kind of cultural, spiritual war, I suppose. But they both would take amphetamine or dexedrine or whatever to wake up in the morning, which in the morning for them ended up being like 3 o'clock in the afternoon to
Right.
7 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And then they both would take opiates and blue bombers, which is what Elvis called is Valium, essentially, to go to sleep.
Mhm.
And so when he first does that with, like you said, with Priscilla, he gives her too much Placidil, and then she falls asleep he's like, "Oh no, baby, it's been 3 days, summertime now." You
Yeah.
fell asleep at Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah. Poor thing.
Nobody thought to wake her up. She's supposed to check in. You know,
Yeah.
that's terrible.
So, here's what she's been exposed to at 16,
Mm.
14, and
Oh my
16.
gosh. Yeah.
Um, and also the other girls. So, this is happening when she goes to see him in America every time in this book. They didn't really bring that up too much in the movie except for that one what's her name? His co-star, the Swedish girl.
Uh, uh and
Anne Margaret.
and Margaret, yeah.
Except for the Anne Margaret scene, but apparently there was a lot more side chicks going on.
Yeah, Nancy Sinatra.
Yeah.
Nancy Sinatra was one.
So it was understood that Elvis's wife would be a woman who would look the other way when she saw him in magazines with other
Right.
people. So one part says, well, she was mad. She says, "I saw the way you were eyeing that girl. It upset me." He said, "Look, woman," losing his temper, "no one tells me who I can who look at and who I can't. Besides, your imagination's getting carried away. I've seen her ass around here long before today." So
Yeah, that part was pretty.
Hollywood is not good on people.
No.
Um,
Yeah, that was pretty tough.
but she was his doll. She was his like little, piece of home. Scylla. She said, "Most of all, he knew he could depend on me. I wasn't interested in a career in Hollywood or anything else that would draw my attention away from him. I also had all the physical attributes that Elvis liked, the fundamentals he could use in turning me into his ideal woman. In short, I had everything that Elvis had been looking for in a woman: youth, innocence, total devotion, and no problems of my own. And I was hard to get because he had to go through her parents." Right?
Yeah, it's weird. It would there's no there's no way to this is just speculation, but it seems the kind of thing that you get from this is that did her Air Force dad sell her to Colonel Tom, basically? Is the way that it kind of seems.
I don't know. It's like, did it just happen organically? Like no one can say no to Elvis no matter what,
Uh,
or
well, that's part. Yeah, that's definitely true. That's
or
also
was there
part.
some deal, like weirdness? I don't know.
But the thing is that she is not she's not responsible for this. This is her parents at this point. And they did this. They're the ones who approved this. They approved for her to be sent to Graceland and to be, he put her into a Catholic school. That also was weird.
Yeah, yeah. But he's promising all along the way, like, you know, I have honorable intentions, and just when the time is right,
which is
yeah,
also true, which is also valid, right?
yeah.
Which is
So
weird.
that's why this one's so, like, nuanced, and,
Yeah.
you can't just it's not just a cut and dry
He's like,
thing.
look, baby, stop talking about Nancy Sinatra. You know, she's shaking her ass all over town. You know, that song, Boots Were Made for Walking, that's about me. I was walking all over with my rhinestone boots.
Yeah. But then, she kinda had to be a role of, like, no problems whatsoever, so she would mention, "I realized that he didn't wanna hear about my problems, he had enough of his own," and who knows what he was going through. So that's what she represented too, like, she wasn't even old enough to have problems, like, he was her biggest problem, you know,
Right.
like, him being not around, because there was a lot of times where she was just there alone at Graceland while he was off making a movie, or
Yes.
um, had another girlfriend or whatever.
Which to me is what the movie is about. That's the biggest takeaway in terms of mood from the movie is the thing I keep thinking about. When I think about this movie, I think about all the scenes where she's at Graceland by herself
Yeah,
and he's
it
gone. Memphis
conveys a lot of
Papa's gone.
solitude, the movie does.
Total isolation, total solitude. She's not allowed to go out. She's not allowed to, you know, talk to people. Like she goes to school, she can't have her friends back over, obviously. And he's like this, he sucks up all the light and energy. And then when he's gone, there's this huge vacuum effect where it's just silence.
Yeah,
And that's one of the
exactly.
things that the movie does really well because you know, there's all these moody, brooding scenes of like, you know, beige and like the way that Graceland was decorated before it got gaudy in the 70s and you know, the jungle room and all this stuff. It's like it's very what you can see is that what you can see with Elvis, by the way, is that
It's definitely
he
Mimon's house before.
yes,
Right.
yes. And that he had nothing. He grew up with nothing. He had nothing. And then he all of a sudden had all this money and fame and power. And so when he does that, he buys all of this junk. It's just junk. Graceland is just junk, right? It's all gold and gaudy and stuff, but it's just kind of junky. It's like Elvis looking at a picture of what Napoleon's palace would be like
Yeah,
and
it's
being
new
like,
money.
yeah, being like, I want it to look like that, but it's all bought. It's just junk. And
Yeah.
so then but before all that, they're at the house and it's just like new furniture. It almost like you imagine it has plastic on all the furniture, right? And she's just walking around the house and there's no music. And that's the biggest thing is that Elvis's music and there's no music. There
Mhm.
are music in scenes where they're together and the music is used to seduce her and show their love affair and show their relationship. But then when she's by herself, it's just nothingness, just total silence.
Yeah, so you put it very well, like, it just sucked the life out of the house, and she was left there, like, and he would even say things like, "I need you to keep the home fires burning,"
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
while while I'm gone.
He said that a few times. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he said that a lot in this book,
yeah.
and so she said, "My world consisted solely of him and waiting for his phone call once a day,
Mhm.
or once every other day." Um,
Caravaggio in the chat says Beverly Hillbilly. Well, it's funny because Elvis loved the Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you know that the Beverly Hillbillies house was next to Reagan's house in California?
Oh, really?
Like where they filmed the exterior of the house, that's next door to Reagan's house. And that's also like where Elvis lives. It's not the same neighborhood, but it's like where Elvis lives. It's that type of mentality.
Yeah. So, and he's got grandma living there, he's got dad, so she was definitely integrated into the family as you know, a family member, and auditioning for the role of
Yeah.
Elvis's wife. Um, but he was very strict, like you said, he wouldn't even let her chat with the girls who worked in the fan mail department,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, she goes in the back and she's like, "Hey, you're girls. You want to talk about anything?" And they're like,
Yeah,
"Oh, hey, Priscilla, we realize you're living here. You're Elvis's beau, you know, or whatever." And
yeah,
then Vernon comes in and he's like, "They're doing accounting back here.
yeah, let them
They're
do their
reading
work,
fan mail.
man.
Yeah, let them put the underwear back in the envelope. Get out of here."
Yeah,
That's terrible.
so and then at this time, they were still waiting at third base. But they
Right.
were doing that scene where they were taking the Polaroids and all that.
Oh,
That was true.
yes.
That's in here.
Yeah,
Um,
that comes up in the autobiography, the Michael Edwards Creep, his
oh,
biography. It's
oh,
Creeper.
really?
Yeah, because there's a scene, there's a part in the book where he says, "You remember those pictures you took with Elvis?" And she's like, "Yes." And he's like, "Let's recreate those." He's like, "He's a creep, I can be a creep too, right?"
Oh,
And
no.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
here's what she said because
He tried to recreate that with Lisa Marie.
oh, that is creepy.
Yes.
But in the book, it is not portrayed as that predatory. She says, under no circumstances were his ideas or playfulness perverted or in any way harmful. So it was just basic, like dress up like a sexy teacher or a secretary or, the very vanilla kind of stuff.
He's like, "I'm gonna be a snowman. Take a picture of me.
No, not even that kinky. Just
Put
like,
on this Mrs. Claus outfit." Right.
yeah. um, just your standard issue little fantasies there.
Right.
So it says, she does say, I was Elvis's doll, his own living doll, to fashion as he pleased. My sole ambition was to please him, to be rewarded with his approval and affection. When he criticized me, I fell to pieces. So now she's building her whole entire um self-worth on if he likes her in prints or in solids.
Pim puts in the comments a poem that Elvis reads at the beginning of one of his songs. Pim, can you put the rest of the poem in there too? Because it's one of my favorite ones. He says, someone once said the world's a stage and each must play a part, right? Which is Shakespeare from As You Like It, I think. All the world's a stage. Now the stage is bare and I'm standing there with emptiness all around. And then he goes on to say, and if there's something they don't like it, they can pull the curtain down. It's very sad. But I'll just say that the thing about Elvis, the way that I get Elvis here, and this is in the first stream that I did, which is he has this song called Hurt. He didn't write the song, obviously, but he sings the song like he owns the song. And it says, I'm so hurt. And what this is leading up to at the end is that when Priscilla, when they get divorced, it tears a hole back in Elvis's life where he's never able to fill it again. And that's the whole thing he was trying to do in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And he's damaged in a way that is good for his art, but that's the reason that he dies at 42, on drugs and alone and empty, because he's alone in the world. And because I think that's the thing about fame, which, it's not that you feel sorry for him or not. It's just that the price, one level of paying a price for this fame is that everyone knows you and nobody knows you. Everyone sees you and nobody can see you, right? You go out and there's millions of people screaming for you, but you can't go to the grocery store, right?
Taylor Swift is saying the same types of things right now.
Yeah. Yeah, they awarded him, they have a clip of it where they awarded him the most influential, thing for the people under 40, for the international JCs. And they asked him about Vietnam. They would continuously try to ask him about Vietnam and about political affiliations. And he consistently, this is one of the things I like about him. He consistently said, he even says it in the clip, he says, look, I'm just a singer. I'm just there to make people happy, to entertain them, and to sing. All of those other things can be left to other people. And they say, do you think it's wrong for other celebrities to, give their opinions on this stuff? And he says, no, ma'am. I just think I'm not going to do it. And I like that about him. That sort of brings him, that endears me to him.
Mm-hmm.
Shouts out to Green Feathers right there, TGF. Good to see you, Green Feathers. Yeah. So where were we in the film? So,
Elvis cover of Until It's Time for You to Go is beautiful. One on my face. I don't know that song. Do you know?
Yeah,
that?
his song Memories is also one of my favorite. Memories pass between the ages of my mind. He's living in his memories.
I like If I Can Dream. That's a good,
it's a great
passionate
song.
one of his songs.
Yeah, his the private Elvis Presley Enterprises record label is called Follow That Dream Records.
Mm.
So that, and that's part of his like spiritual quest, you know.
Mm-hmm. So this is something Priscilla is going to have to grapple with too, is when he meets Larry Geller, who wrote this book, all about Elvis's spiritual journeys.
Yeah.
This is too much for how old is she at this time? Maybe just 19 or 20. You know, and being told she has to go to Manly P. Hall lectures and stuff like that.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. So this wasn't in the movie. But he's trying to create her mind, you know, also like shape her mind to be like his. And he
Can you imagine? You're 20 years old. Your boyfriend is Elvis, and he's telling you, "I can't be with you unless you go to Manly P. Hall lectures."
I know, that's wild, right? I can't find that part. Maybe we're not there yet. But so here she's talking about why he was taking so many drugs, his horror of insomnia and sleepwalking. I don't know if you knew that. Compounded with family history of compulsive worrying, caused him to down 3 or 4 Placidils, Secondils, Quaaludes, Tweenols almost every night.
Yeah.
And often it was a combination of all 4. Priscilla began taking sleeping pills. His consumption of pills seemed to be as normal to me as watching him eat a pound of bacon with a Spanish omelet. So
yeah,
we're not even married yet.
Right. They do a good job in the film of her putting it to him. You know, look, it's time. Right. I've been doing all this stuff for you. It's time that you fulfill your promises.
Yeah, well, he also had that little boyish to him, the Peter Pan like he would always want to do like go-kart races around Graceland and go to the skating rink, go bowling, go see movies every night. Like he was a party animal for sure. She says, between movies with no scripts, no films, no music, other people's problems, he could become a little boy again, escaping from the responsibilities of family, friends, fans, press, and the world. Here with me, he could be vulnerable and childlike, a playful boy who stayed in his pajamas for days at a time. So here she's just graduating high school. Like he literally just went to her high school graduation.
That seems crazy. Yeah.
Then they just run around painting the town red in Memphis when he doesn't have anything to do. So he's like almost like leaping forward and going back in maturity sometimes.
Yeah, the graduation scene was crazy because he's like, "We're all going to the graduation." It's like him and his entourage are like 40 dudes, right?
Yeah, the
And
Memphis.
yes, and she's like, "Maybe you can leave Red and Sunny West outside until it's over, and then we'll celebrate." And he's like, "I respect that."
Yeah.
And he's got a car waiting for her outside when they graduate.
Well, it's funny because that scene was true. Like she's like, "Can you wait outside because everyone's gonna be looking at you and not the kids graduating?" He's like, "Okay," and then
Okay.
she comes out and around them were a group of nuns clamoring for Elvis's autographs.
Oh yeah.
Not even they could resist.
They can't resist the
Not even the
pelvis.
powers of nuns can
Yes.
resist the magnetism of Biggie.
Yeah.
So now she's still trying to please him. My eagerness to please Elvis was so overwhelming that it almost angered him. He always had an excuse why his other relationships hadn't worked out. They were either too hometown or couldn't fit in with his Hollywood lifestyle, or they were actresses too into their careers. But how could he get out of a commitment to such a willing partner as me? So he did want to keep on getting to know all of his like other Hollywood co-stars and things, but he also wanted to keep his promises, to the colonel. I mean, to her dad and her, and she gave him no reason to get rid of her. And I think they loved each other, and in their way.
Welcome to the Heartbreak Hotel.
Yep.
It's the rest of your life.
How long? Their relationship lasts 14 years, so that's quite a long time, especially growing up with somebody.
Yeah. Well, also the time period in which they were falling in love, they get married in the, late 60s. And then Lisa Marie's born in 1968. And then it's the hippie era. And then we get into the 70s era. We have the comeback special, and then 70s era Elvis all the way up to 1977, when Hollywood is in the middle of total Hollywood 70s decadence. And so what she experiences after Elvis is she's got all this money and all this fame, but she's not famous for being a person, right? She's famous for being Elvis's person. Right. And then she goes through all these creepy lookalike people. Right, until she can start to, I guess, she's in the Naked Gun, the movie in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, Lisa Marie, by the way, is born, and she's 9 when Elvis dies. And you can see, so that's a whole other thing, because Lisa Marie's life is totally tragic, right? Mm-hmm. She's her dad is the most famous person in the world, and he loves her. He spoils her, and they have this when he and Priscilla get divorced, they have this co-parenting thing, but he spoils Lisa Marie, and so she knows him through getting anything she wants because she's daddy's little girl, and then he's suddenly ripped away in the most public way. Mm-hmm. And then she's forced to live with this series of creeps, and then she goes on to marry these people. Then she's in the ritual marriage with Jacko, right, on the VMAs. Mm-hmm. So her dad's the king of rock and roll, and then she marries the king of pop.
Yeah.
And that's weird. This whole thing. And then she has children, and then her son, remember her son, KYS, right, just right before she died. Mm-hmm. Her son died. Her son killed himself. And her daughter is Riley Coe, she's a, I don't know, A-list, but she's in Mad Max. She's in all these movies. She looks just like Elvis. She looks just like Lisa Marie. She's very famous.
Yeah. Someone said, didn't Lisa Marie date Nick Cage? They got married for like 3 months. Remember that?
They did. Yeah, because he paid for the divorce by selling Superman comics.
Oh, uh-huh.
You remember that?
Yeah.
So, it must be difficult to be with somebody who just wants to emulate Elvis. Nick Cage was with her because he just wants to be Elvis.
Oh, it felt like he was collecting something.
Uh-huh.
Like the ultimate Elvis fan or something. It's weird. Right. Yeah, so just all of the other women hanging around all the time. His dread game was on point because he would threaten to, break up with her if she didn't fall in line and accept all of these things. A lot of gaslighting of her in this book about other girls. She says, I knew Elvis was very touchy, and I was never sure what might set him off. Well, and the drugs, I'm sure, wasn't helping, keep your temper under control.
Yeah, she says that. There's the one scene where she says, maybe it'd be good to lay off the Dilaudid every once in a while or whatever, right? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were a doctor.
Yeah.
He gets really pissed about it.
Yeah.
And then what was interesting in that scene is walks into the bathroom and she's left staring at like at double mirrors. Mm-hmm. So she's the mirrors in the movies, for the folks at home, the mirrors in the movies always represent an interview into the psyche, right? It's like she's Alice and she's walked into this through the looking glass, through the mirror, into this other world. And now she's left staring at herself in this labyrinth, in the Graceland labyrinth, and doesn't know who she is.
Yeah. Well, because she says here she was always afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. I suppressed my real feelings and eventually developed an ulcer. The more frustrations increased, the more pressure he felt, and this resulted in his manifesting physical illness. So for Elvis too, like they had this problem with worry. Like his mom basically worried herself sick to death about him, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said specifically to handle depression, he was now prescribed antidepressants.
Shouts out to Marconius right there, who becomes a member. You guys, please like and share while we're going here on Elvis, and please share the stream. Please support. We got Jamie here with us talking about Lisa Marie's. I mean, I keep calling her Lisa Marie. Priscilla's book, Elvis and Me. So please make sure you like and share the stream. Thank y'all.
And the movie Priscilla by Sofia Coppola. So we're going back and forth between this book, which I think a lot of that movie was taken straight from. Now we're getting to the point where it's do or die. So they're not married yet, and is he going to send her home, or is he going to remember that scene in the movie where he's like, "Get out of here," and he starts packing her stuff, and he's like, "Buy our plane ticket," and she's like freaking out.
Yeah.
And as soon as she's getting ready to leave, he's like, "No, you can stay." Like he changes his mind.
She calls his bluff.
Yeah. So
it's the most angry packing I've seen since the Scorsese movie Casino, right? He's throwing her dresses and her sparkles into that suitcase.
Yeah. So that's always, hanging over her head. She says, I look back now and realize that our love affair was dependent on how his career was going. During protracted periods of non-creativity, his temper often flared. And then there's that scene. Here's the scene again about when they're listening to the RCA soundtrack, and he asks her. He said, finally, he found one that held his attention and asked me what I thought. Remembering that first incident in Vegas, I truly felt our relationship had developed to where he would want to hear my honest opinion. I don't really like it, I said. What do you mean you don't like it? I don't know, there's just something about it, a catchiness that's missing. To my horror, a chair came hurtling toward me. I moved out of the way just in time, but there were stacks of records piled on it, and one flew off and hit me in the face. So he had his episodes.
Jim Morrison did the same thing with Pamela Corson, his lover that he never married. And Jerry Hopkins, who also wrote an Elvis biography. Jerry Hopkins wrote No One Here Gets Out Alive, the Doors biography. And he would do that when Pam would come in. And one of the famous things Jim did was they were recording the end, and they recorded in 2 takes. But after they had recorded it with Paul Rothchild, he went back into the studio and fire extinguished the entire studio and destroyed all the equipment. And I think this is like an Elvis mentality. It's like I don't know how much of this is like lore or legend. I'm sure it's based in truth, though, which is that these people exist in the public in this weird place where they are a public person in the sense where everybody knows them and they're a sex symbol. Jim called the Doors, or he called rock stars, erotic politicians, where they can influence people. I mean, these people are so famous that what's interesting to keep in mind is that there's a French poet and theorist, Antonin Artaud, and he writes this thing, it's The Theater of Blood and the Theater and its Double, where he talks about how the most powerful thing that a performer can do is to go beyond the performance of the artwork and turn it into a kind of physical violence where there's a riot. And we see this, we still see this now where, there's so much expectation and there's so many people that go to a concert that if for any reason anything goes out of line, the place will riot and the stadium will be torn apart. And Jim did this purposely with Doors concerts because it's a kind of chaos. And Elvis was capable of doing this. His concerts are always kind of wholesome. But I think that because he doesn't have the same level of control, he's completely controlled. And so he takes this out on himself and on the studio and when he's alone, and then on Priscilla. And
Mhm.
I don't know how much of it is fair, because people live lives and people argue and stuff, and who knows what goes on between a husband and wife. I'm just saying that it's interesting to consider that there's a potency, there's so much potential for violence. And so I think that's why in the movie, one of the things that's so stark is that Sofia Coppola always does these movies, which are character studies of women and girls, which obviously she is as an artist and a daughter of a famous person. Francis Ford Coppola is like, she sees herself in these roles. So she does Lost in Translation and Marie Antoinette, or The Virgin Suicides, that movie. And it's like we see these kind of spatial sets where there's a lot of silence and a kind of mood music. And there's this like loneliness inherent in these larger than life characters. And in this, the music is so absent. And we see this, we're supposed to see a fairy tale version of this character, but it ends up being so horrible when just the least bit of anything out of the ordinary occurs. So when he throws that chair in the movie, it's like very violent in the movie. It's
Oh,
stark.
yeah, because the rest of it is so subdued.
Right.
Yeah. Um, there wasn't very many incidents of that level,
Yeah.
according to this book. You know, he was under a lot of pressure from a lot of different places. So she says, Elvis was filled with complexities and contradictions. We would spend an evening discussing the spiritual life and then watch horror films. And then, I don't know if you all watched that movie where we were making fun of that dating, like where can you take your
Yeah.
first date or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yes.
So I'm sure you know about this, but one night he gets this idea and he tells the driver, "Take us to the Memphis morgue."
Mm.
Have you heard this story?
Yeah. I want to go see some, I want to go see some bodies.
Well, yeah, this is just the kind of personality he is. Like he's
Yeah.
just very I want to know everything kind
Yeah.
of mind.
Well, that's also an obsession with death, right?
Mhm.
Which is obvious in terms of hindsight and looking at his career, right? And I mean, he's 42 when he dies, but he looks 75.
Right.
So it's like this Jack Kerouac thing of Jack Kerouac says in one of his, maybe it was one of the other poets, Gregory Corso said about Jack Kerouac that he was Catholic and he was extremely pious and faithful. And he didn't talk about that much, but he knew that he couldn't kill himself. So he did so slowly with alcoholism and drugs.
Oh.
So I think that's sort of the same
And
thing that occurs with
experiences. I mean,
Elvis.
he was just always up for like that's why he took so many uppers and downers and he just wanted to like be awake um and experience everything. And so they were there at the morgue and she says, "We were doing fine until I looked on a table and saw an infant who appeared to be 2 or 3 months old.
Oh, Jesus.
We both gazed in silence. We both took the infant's hand and Elvis said a prayer."
Hmm.
Can you imagine?
I can imagine, because not to psychoanalyze, but I'm sure Elvis was affected by that thinking of his brother.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's who his brother is. And that's one of the reasons why he had trouble sleeping, was he saw his mother and his brother in his dreams a lot.
Mhm.
And again, even though he didn't write his music does have an undertone. I mean, Heartbreak Hotel is the best example of that, right? It's a song about falling in love and the most intense love, and two young people falling in love, but it's about heartbreak, right? You go to this place where you're in love, but it's going to crack, and you're left with this lack of love, this emptiness, and you're yearning for it. That's what I mean. Then that kind of like what rock and roll music sort of is in essence, in a way.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
why
and
there's so many love
especially
songs.
too Motown or, like,
Hmm.
it's very longing and wailing for
Yeah,
and being cheated on and all of those emotions that you go through.
yeah,
Remember, what is it? Hound Dog? Sing that one. Will someone send him a super chat if he sings Hound Dog?
yeah. Send me a super chat and I'll sing Hound Dog. Hound Dog was his version of ritual humiliation. Did you know that?
Yes,
Because
because I remember that scene where they surprised him with the actual dog on the
yes, yes, yes. So Elvis is edgy. He's wearing a gold lame suit, right? A million Elvis fans can't be wrong. He's on television, and his big hit is Hound Dog. And then he's on there, and Frank Sinatra's on there. And Frank Sinatra, there was this weird thing of Frank Sinatra and Elvis are kind of two similar characters. One's older, one's like, and they're both Vegas. They both end up being Vegas, and they're two different generations, and people see this like striking dichotomy between them. And then Elvis has this affair with Nancy Sinatra supposedly, and then he's on there, and he was very respectful to Frank Sinatra liked him. He wasn't how he expected him to be. He thought he would be arrogant and all this stuff, and then he ended up being nice and humble and sweet. But then they hand him this Hound Dog, and he's got to sing Hound Dog on television with an actual dog in his hands, and he hated that. Right. That was his, I think that was, it's funny because it's kind of a wholesome ritual humiliation, right? But it did ruin his image in a number of ways.
You got the feeling that they were trying to knock him down a peg or two. Definitely. You just made me think of, like, remember that era? You've got the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
Them just starting out, and they're, oh my gosh, their music video is so funny because it's like the whitest thing you've ever seen. They're all dressed in like button up to here, and all he's doing is this with his hand, and like the other kids don't know what to do, and they're so like awkward and stiff. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, and Brian Wilson's on the end like, I wrote all these songs, but I'm an intense schizophrenic on LSD. It's very difficult to do this.
I request that one a lot just because the video cracks me up. If you ever watch the Beach Boys like first television appearances, we're talking about Elvis going on TV and being surprised by, he got Kanye Wested by a hound dog, right?
Yeah, Kanye was not happy when they compared him to Elvis. Have you ever heard that clip?
No.
Yeah, they said, "Oh, you need to have pizzazz or something more like Elvis." And he said, "Elvis." He got really pissed about it because it is funny because again, there's a similarity in terms of their characteristics. Not fully. I'm not saying they're the same. I'm just, for anyone watching, I'm saying that in terms of the kind of where they inhabit in the cultural sphere is like a lightning rod, right? And they both have a hugeness to their personality. They go in two separate directions. But I see that, where you want me to be like this because you see where Elvis ended up being. People thought of him as a clown, and I think that's part of Elvis's pain, and I think it's unfair in a number of ways. But
he had that like Carney kind of performing spirit. She talks about how he was raised on hellfire and brimstone preaching. So that came through in his like music. It says that put the fear of God in you, and the music led to the pearly gates. Elvis, Vernon, and Gladys would join in the congregation choir, and it was then the music first rocked Elvis's soul. He was capable of spiritual healing. One touch of his hands to my temples, and the most painful headaches disappeared. He always kept the Bible on his bedside table and read it often. Now faced with an ever-deepening despair, he began looking to other philosophical works for answers, like Khalil Gibran, Siddhartha, and The Impersonal Life by Joseph Benner. But he was always in the spirit of one underlying force, the Almighty God. So he had all of that coming through revival preacher energy. Yes,
absolutely.
Right?
That's a really good, that was a really good excerpt. It was because I think that's insightful in Elvis's character. My favorite Elvis is gospel Elvis in the 70s. Because he had, and that's one thing they can't show in the movie because it doesn't fit into the paradigm of the movie. But if you've seen That's the Way It Is or Elvis the movie, which Martin Scorsese worked on, by the way, Elvis on Tour, like Elvis on Tour 72, there are scenes when he's backstage with the Imperials and the Stamps and all this. And what they would do is, instead of going to the Vegas parties, they ended up having all night gospel singing sessions because these were all gospel trained musicians, and Elvis, his voice and his character is essentially gospel, right? In terms of, like you said, he's a charismatic, he's a sort of as a gospel singing energy, and if by the way, if you want a super chat, I'll sing "Lead Me, Guide Me," the Elvis version, or "I John," and it's beautiful. I mean, Elvis's voice is beautiful. He has a vibrato and a depth to his music. And my analysis of the great singers is that something I learned in drama school, which is that they told us that the great singers, like even stage singers, when you're singing, you notice that instead of singing on the notes, the great singers will own the words and will sing around the notes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you're speaking the words in the song, the lyrics in the song, and you wrote them from your soul. And so the notes are not you're not singing directly on the notes. It's always it's almost jazz, like how they go around the notes. And Elvis does this particularly well. I mean, he's
And a lot of
extremely
Southern
adept.
Black preachers too, like preach with the music behind them in that same kind of
Right.
way, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so it's funny, she says, by the mid-60s, he was holding Bible readings in the den of our Bel Air home. I sat next to him one evening as he read passages with great force. Facing us were several of his young female admirers wearing the lowest cut blouses and the shortest miniskirts. They all listened attentively, disciples enraptured in the presence of their Lord. The sermon stretched to hours, followed by question and answer period during which they vied for his attention. So that's in the movie.
Yes, it
Remember?
is. What did you think of that scene in the movie?
It is word by word accurate. She says one girl was wearing the perfume. He drew in a deep breath and said, I like your perfume, honey. What's it called? Chanel number 5, she answered. Chanel number 5, that's what I was wearing. But I couldn't help noticing that he would respond to them with an occasional wink or smile. And then that night, this isn't in the movie, but right after that scene, you know what I'm talking about, right? He's like preaching to them.
Yeah.
She goes in the room and takes a bunch of pills to like be dramatic enough to get his attention. She said, I swallowed the pills and started to prepare myself for the end. In tears, I thought of leaving him a note, writing down everything I'd never been able to say. She must have not taken enough because she just fell asleep and he came in and kissed her goodnight. And that's what happened of her unaliving attempt.
He's like, dang it, where's all my Demerol and my Dilaudid?
I know. Like sweet dreams, baby.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to have a hunk of burning dreams.
Yeah, later, I guess.
Yes. Next Thanksgiving.
Right? Yeah. So, poor thing. Crazy world. So then this is where he meets Larry Geller. So they're not even married yet, but she's been through this whole relationship with him already. Multiple years of antics, Elvis antics, waiting to be Miss Elvis Presley.
What is the deal with Hollywood hairdressers being the shamans into the new age? Like, it's very weird.
It's funny. That Britney Spears book I was reading, she had a hairdresser that was really giving her good advice, and they had to fire them because she was talking too much sense to Britney. So yeah.
Jay Sebring, right, in the Manson murders, Jay Sebring was reportedly a Satanist and it says in the Chaos book, was involved in some of the 8mm films that took place at Polanski's Cielo Drive. And then you have Larry Geller, and Larry Geller says, so I introduced Elvis to this book, The Secret Doctrine. And Elvis told me, I don't care what you got to do, go get that book, right? And he's like, you got to hear about this lady Blavatsky.
Oh, right. Yeah, Larry Geller's dad is one of the ones who first brought that stuff to Hollywood, introducing them to mysticism, Eastern mysticism.
What a great person to have around. Jeez.
Slowboy Whiteboard says hairdressers have the perfect cover because there should always be tons of traffic in and out of your business, and they probably stay 10 to 30 minutes for a haircut so you can disguise DRUG traffic go.
Yeah, that's what happened with the guy, the John Depp movie Blow was about. And supposedly Jay Sebring was involved in that as well. So yeah, you make a good point, Crystalline.
Yeah. So now he's from Priscilla's perspective, he's now meeting Larry Geller. So they've been through all of these ups and downs, fun times, bad times, cheating, highs of bumper cars, and they put that in the movie, right? Like
Yes.
fireworks and bumper cars era.
And the roller skating. Yeah.
Yeah. Now he's getting down to business. He's got to meet Larry Geller. He's got to.
TCB, baby.
Yep.
Yeah.
He says Larry knows more about the spiritual world than all the preachers and Catholic priests and religious fanatics put together. He says, "You won't believe this guy, Satnin." He called her Satnin.
Read the rest in an Elvis accent. What does he say?
No, that's not good.
No, you won't believe this. You won't believe this guy.
Satnin. He said, Larry knows more about the spiritual world than all the preachers and Catholic priests and religious fanatics put together. I don't know.
You won't believe this guy, honey. He says there's the Great White Way and the Great White Watches. They're all up there, Blavatsky. And have you ever heard of this guy, Al Crowley?
Yeah. Cheerios, book of numbers, baby. Yep. What a character. So he said Elvis discovered that there were many great masters besides Jesus. There was Buddha, Muhammad, Moses, and others, each chosen by God to serve a purpose. Are you okay?
The book of numbers. Sorry, okay, keep going. Oh my God, because he did say that. Yeah.
Used in a numerology. If we do a part 2, I did have an excerpt about Elvis in one of my books talking about ascended masters, like basically worshiping celebrities like gods. Have they resurrected from the dead? The mythos that surrounds them, like, after they die, especially Michael Jackson and Elvis. I don't have it right here, but I will next time maybe.
I'm an 8, baby. That's my numerology. I'm an 8. I wish I was 11 like Aleister Crowley.
He was always like trying to find signs that they were like soulmates or whatever. Mm-hmm. And she was relieved that their numbers matched in the Cheerios book of numbers. That was another sign that she would eventually be wed to Mr. Elvis Presley.
Now, part of that again is he's from Tupelo. He's raised in a Baptist, charismatic, Gnostic Pentecostalist atmosphere. He lives on charisma. He's from deep South folklore, and so things like numbers and love, that's fairly normal, But it's when he has these people around him, he doesn't have any. Look. Do you guys have any, when you go get your hair cut, is there somebody there, is Lucinda there cutting your hair, and she's like, have you ever heard of Manly P. Hall? It just doesn't, that's just not a thing. Right. So who's there to tell him anything? There is a scene in the film where he gets a call from Colonel Tom. Right. And that's the only time when he checks himself, because he's on the phone and he's like, so you're saying that I should give up all this new age stuff. It's over. It's run its course. Okay, Colonel Tom. And then he ends it. Yeah. Right. But that, by the way, was my favorite scene. This sequence in the movie is my favorite part, because when I was asking you about what you thought of that scene, I think it's factual, and I think it's that she described it, but I'm not sure how truthful it is in terms of, probably in terms of her walking in and seeing him sitting there, and he's reading like Exodus, and all the girls are sitting there, and there's the low cut thing, and they ask about Chanel number 5, but it would be hard for anybody to walk in and see. Who's to say that Elvis isn't genuine in that? I bet you anything. I'm not trying to apologize or anything for him, but I'm saying that I bet you in that instance, what he was thinking he was doing was introducing people to the Bible. So he's talking to these girls.
He was trying to use his influence to,
Yes. And so they're all sitting there looking at him. But if they were to say to him, you're our Messiah, he'd be like, what are you talking about, baby? Like he wouldn't like that.
Baby. Yeah.
Right. So, but he's trying to read Exodus to them. He's trying to read the gospel to them. And then it goes on to him reading the yogi books. Right. He's reading like the Bhagavad Gita or whatever in the yogi books. And my favorite scene in the movie is he's lying in bed with her. 3/4 of this movie takes place in the sanctum sanctorum of the bedroom at Graceland.
Yeah.
And, you've got blackout shades, you've got the dark room, the bedroom. They don't leave for days. There's the whole montage sequence of the food on the trays being placed outside the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Peanut butter and banana sandwiches all day, baby. And, they're up there taking Demerol or whatever. And then there's a scene where he's lying in bed and he's got his reading glasses on. He's got his reading glasses on and he's sitting there going, did you know that Aleister Crowley said, and whatever he's saying. And she says, I'm kind of like, she's like, do we have to keep reading this? And he looks at her and he takes his reading glasses off and he's like, baby, this is what I'm into. If you don't like me reading Manly P. Hall, then you got to go.
Yeah.
Right. And it was very funny because first of all, you never see Elvis with glasses on.
Right.
Like he's sitting there with his reading glasses, but he did have, this is schizo knowledge. He did have horrible eyes and he had glaucoma.
Mm.
And the reason he had glaucoma was because, like you mentioned earlier, how he dyed his hair black because of the comics.
Mm-hmm.
His hair was actually light brown or auburn, and he would dye it black. You could tell when you watch the concert films, it's dyed black, and the lights from the stadium would melt the hair dye and it would drip into his eyes.
Oh, no.
So it caused him intense pain. He got glaucoma, and then he used that to get Demerol prescriptions, which is interesting because Michael Jackson did the same thing when his hair caught on fire in the Pepsi commercial, and then he was burned all over his body, and then he became addicted to Demerol.
Mm-hmm.
So Elvis can't see. So at home he's got reading glasses and he's using a he's got like a monocle in, right? And he's trying to see.
Yeah. Like peers down over the top of his bifocals or whatever. Like,
yes, his bifocals.
You heard of Manly P. Hall, baby. Someone says Elvis the Ho evangelist. Yeah. Oh, so here's that part. She said, he suggested I attend the lectures of the metaphysical philosopher and author Manly P. Hall. I did. I found the lectures difficult to understand and painful to endure, but I managed to survive with the hope that this too shall pass.
It's just like Reagan and Nancy Reagan, right?
Yeah. And then this is about the time where he's getting more strict on his temptations. So she said, any sexual temptations were against everything he was striving for, and he did not wish to betray me, the girl waiting for him at home who was preparing to be his wife. He felt guilty and confused about his natural reaction to female advances, and I believe that this was his greatest fear when it came to marriage. He loved me and deeply wanted to be faithful to me, but never felt certain that he could resist temptation.
I think that this is part of one of the deep complexities of Elvis, where he's surrounded by temptation and he has this thing in his heart and he's searching and he can't. He wants to be pure in one sense. He wants to remain pure, and I think that's part of the denial with the drugs. Because he was a slave to his passions with drugs, but he was able to brush that away with Dr. Nick, and the prescriptions. That comes to a head later in his life because he finds out that his cousin, one of the Memphis Mafia guys, was a heroin addict. And you can still hear it on YouTube. One of the recordings of Elvis talking is so scary. He goes absolutely ballistic over this because he orders his fellas to go and find the guy that sold him the drugs. And he says he don't want any, because then when Red West and Sonny West wrote that tell-all book, it's called Elvis What Happened, after he fired him. They wrote about how Elvis was on drugs, and they said that he was a heroin addict, and this made him insane because in his mind, and I think that he really meant this, in his mind, he thought he was not a filthy junkie, as he said.
Yeah.
And that he was getting legitimate prescriptions, even though he was doctor shopping and having all of the fellas go and get prescriptions for him in other names. So I know that when they did an audit of Dr. Nick's prescriptions, he took an unbelievable amount of drugs. He was prescribed 300,000 opiates in 1 year. He was on Percodan, morphine, Demerol, Dilaudid, Vicodin, Percocet, just everything that you could be on. And this even went so far as, I know that when he died, upstairs, they cleaned out his bedroom and they found all these needles. They found syringes. And the other thing they found was liquid cocaine. And he was using liquid cocaine because of his eyes, because of the because of the glaucoma. And that's where there's the scene where they get the bottle of LSD, right? Which is a weird scene in the movie where they trip and he's like, "Well, I see stars around you, baby."
Yeah.
Right. He doesn't really take to that. He doesn't really like psychedelic drugs, but they show it weirdly in the movie.
Yeah, she talks about that in a little bit. He was seeking higher consciousness. He said, "We experienced with mind-expanding drugs. We tried marijuana a few times, and neither of us especially liked it. We felt tired and groggy, and we'd become ravenously hungry. Although he abhorred street drugs, he was curious enough to try LSD once. Elvis and I took half a tab. At first, nothing happened. Then we started staring at each other and laughing. Our faces were becoming distorted." So, according to her, they only did that like one time.
That also LSD was legal at the time, right?
Right.
And so they get blotter, and how much you want to bet they got this through Colonel Tom
Oh,
through the military.
100% military
Right.
grade. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing less for Elvis. But so as this is going on, his spiritual awakening, including drugs, it always happens that way in New Age, right? He's telling her, "Things will never work out between us, Scylla, because you don't show any interest in me or my philosophies." Then he pointedly, "There are a lot of women out there that would share these things with me." So that's in the movie. She's trying to, snuggle up to him, and he's like, "Read this." And she's like, "I don't want to read. I want to like mac on you." And he's like, "No, gotta talk about Manly P. Hall."
He's like, read Fritz Springmeier by tomorrow,
baby.
I
want to talk about Pythagoras.
I want to talk about metempsychosis and the transmigration of the souls, baby.
It says Elvis's fascination with occult and metaphysical phenomena intensified. Larry introduced him to the Self-Realization Fellowship Center on Mount Washington, where he met Diamata, the head of the center. She was an attractive woman who looked remarkably like Gladys Presley, and he was captivated by her serenity and spiritual presence. She epitomized everything he was striving to be. Also, at the same time, they're trying to teach him this kind of Kriya yoga, which is like super advanced, only for like crystal level 10 people. I don't even know. Have you heard of Kriya yoga?
Blue diamond formation, crystal level infinity from Kether to Malkuth, baby.
Only for indigo children who see the color blue when they're born. You remember that story? There was a mysterious blue light where he was born.
Are you an indigo child, baby?
Yeah. He only liked blue-eyed indigo babies.
Blue light when he was born.
Oh, here's a good story you'll like. What I think you were talking about him breaking up a fight one time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it says, "We are on our way home from Mount Washington, this spiritual yoga place, right? Where he's supposed to be all like enlightened out. We were on our way home from there in the limousine, and we passed a service station. 2 attendants were staging a fight. 'Pull over,' Elvis ordered the driver. 'Someone's in trouble.' He jumped out of the car, Jerry and Sonny following him. Going up to one of the men, he said, 'Hey, you want to give somebody trouble? Give it to me.' Elvis said, 'I'll show you something. If you want to get into an argument,' he shot out a karate kick, and to his surprise and everyone else's, he knocked a pack of cigarettes out of the guy's pocket. Among our group, Elvis was known for his precision in karate. So he literally just karate kicked a pack of cigarettes out of the guy's pocket, and the guy's like, 'Okay, you win the fight.'" Like,
Ki-ai! Tempo karate.
Ki-ya, baby.
Yeah. This is one of my books right here. It's Elvis's. It's called The New Gladiators: Elvis's Love for Karate.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
It's a great book. Look.
So yeah, even she has to get into karate because he is so enamored with karate, right?
Yes, and this is. It's important to realize, though, at the time. I mean, Elvis loved Bruce Lee also, and that Steve McQueen was taking lessons from Bruce Lee, and martial arts were becoming a thing. But Elvis got fully into this thing, and became a he became a full seventh Dan karate, Kempo karate master with the TCB logo on his karate. That's where I'm wearing my karate jacket, everybody. But have you heard the story about him and Alice Cooper?
Mm-mm.
So Alice Cooper tells a story that when he was at the height of his, be my Frankenstein fame, he went to the International Hotel where Elvis had his residency. And Elvis had he had the penthouse, and they would have these parties after Elvis played like two shows a day or whatever. And at night, that was Elvis's prime time. And he finally, like, he was like, I'm Alice Cooper. I'm a huge star. And they were like, we don't care who you are. They wouldn't let him in, And then finally he got into the party. And then finally, like after 2 hours, he got through the party and saw Elvis surrounded, by all of his guys. And Elvis said, hey, you're that goofy goth fella or whatever. and Alice Cooper started saying like, wow, you're my idol. And Elvis said, enough of that. Do you know how to disarm a man when he's pointing a gun at you?
Yeah.
He pulled out his pistol and it was loaded, and he handed it to Alice Cooper, and he said, point it at my chest. And Alice Cooper pointed it at Elvis's heart. And Alice Cooper says, I was terrified because he didn't, know handguns in the first place. And also, what if he killed Elvis? And he said before he knew it, he looked up and Elvis had a boot like in Alice Cooper's chin, and he was lying on the ground.
Oh, dude.
And so Elvis had grabbed the gun, disarmed him, flipped him over, and done a karate chop, and had his boot in his heel of his boot in Alice Cooper's chin. And he was looking up and he said, that's how you disarm somebody, baby. All right, have a nice night. And then and then he was ushered out of the party.
Isn't that in a movie?
Yeah. Well, he does the same thing. I mean, he used karate for his stage moves also, obviously, in Vegas and stuff. But this will lead to his karate instructor, Mike Stone, having an affair with Priscilla. And then that's where things go really, really strange. Let me give some shouts out real quick. Thanks for the support. Shouts out to Real John Connor, who sends $5 and says, ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. There you go.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Real John Connor. Shouts out to Real John Connor, who also sent $20 and says, for a giant bucket of soup would be nice. Yes, thank you for that. Really appreciate it. I need a big bucket of Elvis soup with peanut butter and banana ham sandwiches. Thank you so much, Real John Connor. Love you. Appreciate you out there. Also, shouts out to Michael Gandy, who sends $20 on PayPal and says, BLA, a great host. Jamie, a class act. Yes, she is indeed a class act. Thank you so much. And we'll get to the other super chats, YouTube super chats, dono chats, if we've got any, and all that. Please continue to send in your support.
I'm trying to find the part with all the pet names and all the different funny words they use. Dang it. Because now we're up to the point in the movie where they're going to get married.
Right.
It's been, now she's 21 and he's 32. And Colonel gives him an ultimatum. He's like, either cut this poor girl loose or marry her, because she's been devoted for how long?
At this point, at least I think at least 10 years at this point. Hasn't it been? No.
Well, they met when she was 14 and they married when she was 21.
Yeah, so 1959.
Yeah.
To 1966. So, yeah, so 7 years. Yeah.
He comes in one day and he just says, we're going to be married. You're going to be his, because that's another thing he would talk about himself in the third person a lot. He said, I told you I'd know when the time was right. Well, the time is right. She lived with him for 5 years up until this point. And then they have to go away to Vegas to get married real fast, because if word breaks out, it's going to be bedlam, right?
Yes. And the other thing, Kit actually makes a good point here. You've made some mistakes if Colonel is telling you to shape up. Well, that makes me realize that another comparison between Elvis and Hotler is that that one of the reasons Elvis was putting off marriage, and that the Colonel probably disapproved of it in the first place, or actually, Colonel didn't want them to get married, right? Until a certain time, which was in the mid '60s when he was in the middle of Hollywood career, and Elvis's career was totally floundering at this point. So it
Yeah.
didn't matter, or this helped to bring him back into the public, into the limelight. Is that when a person like this who's super famous gets married, it it unconsciously or like in a weird psychic way tells his audience, which is full of women, single women, that they won't be the wife
Yeah.
because their dream is that they imagine themselves with Elvis. And so if he's married, it does something to their sort of psyche. And then, Hotler said this, like with why he wouldn't get married to Eva Braun, right? He was married to Germany and all this stuff because, it says that it opens the possibilities of everyone can be with him. Queen Elizabeth the First, right? The
Uh-huh.
Virgin Queen married to England. It's this weird psychic thing. But I think at this point in the mid '60s, it didn't matter anymore because Elvis's career was he was totally whack in the '60s. Nobody, the major stars would name check him and they would, talk about him as an influence, but he was irrelevant in terms of the culture at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was really floundering until they did that special.
Yes.
And so then he's like, they're trying to end his spiritual quest at the same time. They're like, calm down, get married to Priscilla, burn all your books. Because she says Elvis's spiritual quest hadn't gone unnoticed. Everyone from the entourage to film crews was aware of a change in his personality over the years he studied with Larry Geller. Elvis's vibrant personality was now passive and he was becoming more introverted. He buried his head in books and he diligently lugged to and from the studio every day.
Yeah.
So
what did
they
you think
said,
when they burned the books in the movie?
That's true. It says that night at 3 a.m, Elvis and I piled a huge stack of his books and magazines into a large box and dumped them into an abandoned water well behind Graceland. We poured gasoline over the pile, lit a match, and kissed the past goodbye.
Yeah, I
No
gotta
more secret
say,
teachings of all ages.
yeah.
No more Cheerios. No more tarot cards. No more ET books. What else was he
Now,
reading?
what's interesting is that Elvis is reading these books, and we read these books.
Yeah.
We now for a different purpose, but you read them, I read them. We got we got books behind us, and so I like that Elvis is reading.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta say, and I don't like, well, in some instances I do, but I did like in this part in the movie where that yogi book was on the top of the
Yeah.
pile when they were burning it, and I just went based, get rid of this. You're
Yeah.
done with it now, you know.
They show in Graceland on the tour some books that survived. And one of them was like something in the Lotus. It's a tantric Eastern mysticism book. I have a copy of that somewhere that I got in Occupy Wall Street or something.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, that's the book that Elvis. I never read it. Maybe I should pull it out.
So you were at Occupy Wall Street, but you were at the bookstore buying. That's pretty
It
cool.
wasn't a bookstore. It was like the Occupy library. Like people had
Right.
donated all of these books for people to like read in their tents or whatever. I didn't stay in a tent. That's not
Right.
how I'm going to protest. But I did check out their setup and I went to their library and it said, take one if you want it. And I'm like, oh, this is my souvenir. So. But
So you got that, the Anarchist Cookbook,
yeah.
Manly P. Hall, and
Cheerios Book of Numbers.
yeah.
So he's burned all his esoteric books. He's getting married. They did save it until the wedding. It says, I don't think he really knew what to do with me. After all, Elvis had protected me and saved me for so long. He was now understandably hesitant about fulfilling all his promises about how very good this moment was going to be. As old-fashioned as it might sound, we were now one. It was special. He made it special like he did with anything he took pride in. So, pretty sweet little Vegas wedding.
Right.
And then not long after that came Lisa Marie. So very soon after that is when she got pregnant.
Yeah, right after the marriage. So it's kind of exactly as he wanted it, I guess. Exactly as he planned it.
And then he starts having cold feet.
Right.
Right. And there's that scene in the movie where she's, 8 months pregnant or whatever. And he's like, I think we need time apart. And she's like, what? You just married me and knocked me up. And now you want to like take time apart?
Yeah. He's like, I get tired of you not talking all the time. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
All you do is agree with me.
Right. That must be tough.
So yeah, he calls her in. He says, Scylla, I have time to think. Things aren't just going right. It'll be good for the two of us to take a little time off, a trial separation.
I wonder how truthful this is,
She calls his bluff again. And then he changes his mind again.
Yeah. I wonder what this was about or if it even happened. I mean, because you don't know. All right. I mean, we're taking her word for it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no reason not to, I suppose. But this part is it's strange. I feel like this is the sort of thing because the influence that he was really subject to was the influence of his mother, right? In a memory spiritual sense, and then Colonel Tom had overriding influence in every way on everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if this was Colonel Tom saying you need to split with this girl for a minute or something. It just doesn't seem. It seems, or maybe it was drugs, or maybe it was.
He's having some psychological battles because he wouldn't be with her for a long time after the baby's born.
Yeah.
So like 2 months, she said she brought it up to him, and he said, "Let's wait a little longer." And then he had mentioned before they were married that he'd never been able to make love to a woman who'd had a child. So now months had passed. She said she wrote in her diary, she's beginning to doubt herself as a woman. My physical and emotional needs were unfulfilled. So it's getting weird.
Yeah, that's Beloved says in the chat, Elvis made her a Madonna, so he was weird about her not being virginal. Maybe that's true.
Yeah, and so this is how she gets in trouble with her dance teacher named Mark. That was her first affair. They don't really show these in the movie. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you're in dangerous territory when you're cheating on Elvis.
Yeah.
You're in extreme danger. And that's confirmed. Because they didn't go in. Well, they did go into her with Mike Stone in the movie. Because he would come up when they split apart, when they divorced, he would still come over to visit her. First, he would call, and she still had to be on call because he's still paying for her, I mean, and he has this hold over her. But he would call her talking to his wife, baby mama / mother daughter figure, which is all messed up.
Yeah.
And then
There's
there
a
were
lot of
parts.
relationships going on between them.
Yes. And then there's a part where in that creepy autobiography, the guy talks about how he says, I was at Elvis's house and I was Elvis. And then he would come over and talk to Priscilla and she would leave and be talking to him outside by the pool. And I would be inside and he wouldn't even know it. Wow. I really had one over on him. He's totally psychotic. But I think the same thing happened with all of these, not affairs that she had after the divorce, but when she was having affairs. And then when he heard about the Mike Stone thing, I'll talk about that in a second, I suppose. The thing with Mike Stone. That's like Elvis at his probably worst.
She tells the story of him going to DC. He has a fight with the colonel, and then he decides he wants to go get his narcotics badge.
Yeah.
So he thinks he can just walk into the White House and ask the president for this federal narcotics badge for himself.
Yeah.
She says Elvis was an avid badge collector. He had detective, police, and sheriff badges from all over the nation, and the narc badge represented some kind of ultimate power to him. Elvis and his Memphis Mafia gave them the right to carry arms with the federal narcotics badge. He could legally enter any country both wearing guns and carrying any drugs he wished.
Yes. So, okay, so the way that they show this in the various movies is kind of admirable because it's pretty close to the story, but the way it is in the book is in Careless Love is totally different. So what happened with that was there's two things leading up to it. First of all, Elvis despised the Beatles, but he did meet them and he was very kind to them and he liked John. And John's idol was Elvis. He ended up also meeting, there's a part in Stairway to Heaven, the biography of Led Zeppelin, where they went to Graceland and they went to go meet him. And he kept them waiting. Like he was upstairs forever and then finally came downstairs. And when he came downstairs, he gave, I think it was John Paul Jones. He gave him he was like, you like this ruby on my ring? And he gave him the ring and he talked to him for like 5 minutes. And he was like, well, what are you long haired guys doing? He didn't know who they were. But it was kind of a power play unintentionally, from Elvis. Like this is the guy. And they were in awe, but he hated what was happening with Vietnam and with the hippies and with like the destruction of government build, all this stuff. Right. And so he would, and the other thing is he would often get in the Lisa Marie, he would get in his jet and take the fellas out for cheeseburgers and they would fly to Denver. He was like, Denver has the best cheeseburgers. They would fly to Denver to pick up bags of cheeseburgers. And so one day they were on a cheeseburger run and he was like, turn the plane around. We're going to DC. And he decided while he was on the plane that he didn't like what was happening with drugs in the country. So he wrote this letter and he wrote it to Nixon and it's like chicken scratch. It's like, even, for Elvis, like, and what the irony is that Elvis again was on morphine, Demerol, Percodan, Percocet. He was on Dilaudid. He was on liquid cocaine. He was on Valium. He was on like 9 different pills at the time, but because they were prescribed, they were legitimate. So he said, we're going to fly to DC. He had him drive him right up to the White House. He had the Memphis Mafia give the note to the guys at the front gate. And they were like, well, how do we know it's Elvis? So they went to the car and he's in the back seat and he was like, hey, baby. And they were like, come on in. So they went up to the White House and they had to call Nixon, who was playing golf, back to the White House. And Nixon was like, I don't want to meet one of these long haired. And they were like, no, it's Elvis. This guy seems to be on our side. This would be a culture coup because it'll be somebody who at least was popular that nobody likes you, right? In terms of
yeah,
music.
right.
So we'll get this one guy and it'll be a photo op.
Yeah.
So then what happened was they went in and while they were waiting, they tried to go straight into the Oval Office. And they were like, Secret Service was like, no, you got to wait. They patted him down and they found that they were all armed, including Elvis. Right. And so they took the guns away. And then when Nixon got there, he invited him in. He was talking to him. They got their photo op. And then Elvis told Nixon, I want this DEA badge. That's why I'm here. And so Nixon said, go over to Treasury and get a DEA badge and make Elvis a Secret Service agent or a DEA agent. So they got that done. And when they awarded it to Elvis, he took a picture of it and he said, what about my 2 friends here? And they were like, why didn't you say that in the first place? And we can't just make Jerry Schiller and Sonny West DEA agents. And he was like, get it done, baby. So Nixon had it done.
Yeah.
And then Elvis went through what's the White House desk, like old Ironsides or whatever, the desk in the Oval Office.
The Resolute desk.
Yeah, the Resolute desk. So Elvis,
that's National Treasure.
That's right. So Elvis is like, oh, we're going to rescue we're going to steal the Declaration of Independence, and goes into the Resolute desk and he starts opening drawers, like going through it, going, I think you got another badge in here somewhere. And then, and Secret Service is like, this is wild. Like, we don't know how to control this because it's the president. We don't want to say no to this guy. So then Elvis goes, get that present we got for Nixon. And they bring in a box, and the box has like a Derringer in it, like a commemorative Derringer, but it's loaded.
Right.
And they're like, you can't give this to the president. And he's like, so he pulls it out and he like cocks the gun and he hands it to Nixon, And so they're playing with firearms, like in the White House. And then finally they usher him out. And then Elvis is like, we're going to go bust some drug addicted marijuana junkies.
Yeah.
And Nixon's like, thank goodness we got this guy out here.
And like, it's so crazy because on the way there, he never carried money and he just like broke away from the colonel, and a couple guys were like, well, I guess we can write a check for cash and fund our trip that way. So Elvis had $500 and he ended up giving it to a veteran that he sat next to on the plane.
Yeah.
You know, and they're like, where are we going to get more money? He's like, I don't know.
What's money?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he just doesn't think like that. You know, there's always more
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
But that's such a wild story. And you reminded me that they made that into a drunk history that came out pretty good. Did you see that? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The Michael Shannon movie, where they do that is pretty good. Michael Shannon, like, honestly plays a pretty good Elvis. I didn't expect him to, but he did.
Yeah.
There's also, he did that with the car. You know, he was the you get a car, you get a car. He was Oprah before Oprah.
That's
And
what this book is mostly about. So here's another biography that I read a couple years ago by Marty Lacker.
That's one of his Memphis Mafia, yeah.
And he was all about how generous. I mean, so this half of this book is just him giving away things to people.
He was incredibly generous. He would get a new ring made and then throw it. He said something told me in my spirit to throw it out into the audience, and he would throw it out into the audience.
Yeah.
He threw, you know, when he had the cape made for the Aloha from Hawaii, the cape was worth like $100,000. It had diamonds and rubies on it, and he just takes it off and he throws it into the audience, and the guy kept it. And the guy sold it, and then eventually Elvis Presley Enterprises had to buy it back from somebody, and now it's in Graceland. But he just gave this stuff away. And the famous one is when he went to the Cadillac store in Memphis, and he bought Cadillacs for all the Memphis Mafia. And then the guy selling the Cadillac said, "Well, why don't you buy me one? You know, I'm here." He was joking. And I was like, "You got one." So he bought one for him. And then it got into the radio. It got like the radio in Memphis picked it up, and they were like, "Elvis is buying Cadillacs," and all these people came down, and there were like these old ladies who came, and they were like, "I can't afford, you know, bread," and Elvis gave them money and bought them all Cadillacs. He bought like 29 Cadillacs in one day.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of stories like that. I guess, you know, this movie isn't about Elvis, it's about Priscilla's perspective, but yeah, so regularly, especially around the holidays, they'd find the poorest neighborhoods they could. I mean, like poor, like shack poor. And he would go and like buy them the whole Christmas holiday experience, you know. So there's a lot of good going on.
Yeah, he also donated, you know, St. Jude's Hospital is in Memphis, and he donated huge amounts of money to St. Jude, I think anonymously. He would always stay at Baptist Memorial when he was in Memphis, because that's where my grandparents would, because my family's from North Mississippi, and the nearest hospital is Memphis. So they would always go to Baptist Memorial. And I remember they were there one time when he was there. And my uncle saw him play at a hayride in 1955 before he was famous in Mississippi.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he played at a little stadium here in Paris too, when in his early 50s. But now we're up to the part where their marriage is not it's not going to last, because this level of fame is unsustainable, you should say.
Yeah.
And she's off cheating with her dance instructor. They go to Hawaii to try to rekindle things, but then he gets his Vegas residency, and that's just way too much. Performing and fame, again, temptations. She's going to karate with Chuck Norris's friends. Mike, the karate guy.
Yes.
She said, I decided to continue my training with a friend of his, Chuck Norris, who had a studio close to my home. Mike would sometimes come to Chuck's studio as a guest trainer. My relationship with Mike now developed into an affair. Things are unraveling very fast. He's always in Vegas performing. And he has banned the wives from coming to the shows. Only like opening night and closing night, and the rest, the wives of all of his guys and Priscilla cannot come.
Yeah. Which ends up happening with a lot of these rock stars, banning the wives on the tour. Hopefully you guys can see me. I got a low signal here, so give me a thumbs up if you can still hear me in the chat. Hopefully we're still going.
Yeah, so this scene is in the movie, and one of the last times they were together, she said the maitre d' came up. This is an Elvis during his show, his residency show. The maitre d' came to my table with a message that Elvis wanted to see me upstairs. I went filled with curiosity And when I arrived in the suite, I found him lying in the bed, obviously waiting for me. He grabbed me and forcefully made love to me. It was uncomfortable and unlike
Mm.
any other time. This was how a real man makes love to a woman. This was not gentle. He was under the influence, and with my personal growth and new realities, he had become a stranger to me. So they're losing it.
Yeah. Yeah,
And then
that's
she
terrible.
decides, yeah, this is kind of where, the movie, like the movie's maudlin throughout the whole thing anyway, so it's not like a
Mm.
sad divorce time. It's just kind of like, well, we all knew this was going to happen, right?
Yeah. Yeah, one thing about the movie, what did you think of the actors playing the characters? What did you think about that?
I think she looked the part and so did he. He was a little more subdued, and I scanned this book 2 times. I wish I could have found his little like words for things. Maybe if we do a part 2, I'll find it. But like they were a lot more goofballs than they portrayed in the movie.
Yeah.
Um I thought it was interesting how he was so much taller than her.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Especially it was exaggerated in the movie, like he was, at least a good foot and a half taller than her.
Yeah, I think Sofia Coppola did something really brilliant here. Which is that the other Elvis movie, part of the thing about having that actor play Elvis was that I mean, I know Elvis performances really well, so I know that his little nuances in terms of the performances are exactly right. He does everything exactly in movement. It's like, but it's not an impersonation. It's just a recreation of Elvis with an actor instead of AI, but he's
Mhm.
meant to look like Elvis. But one thing this movie did purposefully was they have two actors who don't really look like the characters. They sort of do, but not really. And so I can see that being a drawback to people going, like, for instance, this guy doesn't look like Elvis. He does sound like it. He sounds very much like Elvis. But I think that they did that because this might be going too far, but I think the reason Sofia Coppola did that was because the movie is showing us so much alienation and so much, like you said, like there's this maudlin energy throughout the movie, and there's so much alienation that the characters don't know what they mean in life, and they don't know what they mean to each other. And even when they're alone together, it's like they're separate. And even when they are alone, they're trying to find their way through the world. So that translates to us as watching these the story of these two people who are so famous that we can't really know who they are. And so it fits that we have actors who don't really look like the characters, because in our
Mhm.
minds we can see pictures of Elvis and Priscilla, but and we can see film of it and we can hear the music, but we don't really know who they are in real life.
Right.
And we get a glimpse into this with literature and with the biographies and all this stuff and all this various stories people tell, but we don't know in terms of who they really were and what they really meant. And so it fits that she conveys this sort of alienation where they only live in our memory, and their faces are skewed in our memory, just like your face, like faces are skewed in a dream, right?
Mhm.
Dream faces are kind of distorted, and so we're watching this weird surrealistic, kind of dark version of Elvis and Priscilla. And then
Uncanny
what
Valley Elvis.
Yes, and what that means to me is that the unreliable narrator in this is strong, because even though we have no reason to doubt this vision of Elvis, it's also seen through the eyes of an artist, through the eyes of a woman who is not Elvis.
Right.
So the entire relationship is like there are layers of alienation built in. So again, we can't really know who they are, and it ends up being this sort of it's like Faulkner says that like memory lives in the present through the stories that people tell about each other, but there's no way to know the real person once they're gone and you have a time distance. If
Mhm.
it was a person 50 or 100 years ago, you only have their words and the stories of them, and that ends up skewing who they were.
Yeah.
And so all we have is their art, which is much more potent and powerful than who they were as people, but it's skewed, is my take.
Yeah. So he's lost himself now. He's a caricature, larger than life
Yeah.
character. Um, Probably a lot of delusion going on about
Yes.
who he is, thinking Messiah thoughts still. He thinks
Right.
he can part the clouds and stop the rain, and stuff like that. And
I'm a wizard, baby. I'm a sorcerer.
yeah,
I'm an all-powerful genie.
yeah. He's an ascended master.
Yes.
Well, I mean, but that's what his costumes also at this era are reflecting. Like he's got the one with the Mayan calendar in the back, and yeah, his high collars. They said it's because he was self-conscious about his long neck, but this Larry Geller book says that he was also drawing inspiration from mystical masters and gurus for his costumes. But he's lost her not really to another man, but to her own self, because now she's about 28 when they get divorced. 1973, she's grown up and she's realized, like, I am not just an extension of Elvis Presley. I'm actually like a person also. Especially when he's given her so much, free time to deal without him.
Yeah.
It was kind of inevitable. And then one of the last scenes was like they were trying to take a family portrait, but Lisa Marie didn't want to go to mommy or daddy, because she even says in this book, like, she knew the nannies better than us at that point because we weren't really around.
Poor Lisa Marie. I really feel for her. It must be very sad.
Yeah. So that's kind of where the book ends, and also like where the movie ends, like for their divorce. And they had a very amicable split. They really cared about her. There was no trying to hurt each other or, scandalize anything. It was all very tender.
Yeah.
Right?
Love me tender.
There you go.
Right? Yeah.
That's worth a super. Keep going.
Love me true.
Yes.
All my dreams fulfill. Yeah. Also, the Tiger Man. He wears the Tiger Man on his suits, right? That's my spirit animal, baby. I'm a tiger. I'm a Tiger Man.
Love me
train. 16 coaches long. You remember that song?
Yeah. Love Me Tender is such a simple melody that like resolves itself so nice. It's almost like baby's first melody, but also comforting. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, Thus Spake Zarathustra, right? The 2001 theme starting every concert. And now and the whole Elvis has left the building. I mean, that's it's such a part of like public consciousness now, right? Because it means it's actually weird because it kind of connotes death now that Elvis has left the building. He's left our conscious, a person has left. But Thus Spake Zarathustra is interesting because people take it as like it's certainly esoteric, right? This weird sort of dualistic thing, this like ritual that you're walking into at an Elvis concert. And there are certainly aspects of that. The screaming fans, the fanaticism, the charisma, the Pentecostalist preacher on stage singing, the booming band. And I mean, his band alone, he had a full orchestra. He had the Imperials, he had the Stamps, he had this huge band. And on the drums, Ronnie Tutt. He's got this big, Fraggle Rock drummer in the background.
Yeah.
And yet there manages to be this intimacy and this closeness in the concerts. One thing about in the movie where they showed her relationship with Mike Stone, the guy that she had the affair with. So here's what happened with that. So Elvis heard that that she was having an affair with him, and this is confirmed, he took out a hit on this guy. He actually did a contract to have this guy smoked. Okay. And he talks about it on stage at one point. And then there are backstage recordings of him talking about this. And I gotta say, this is like so terrible. It's very scary to listen to Elvis this mad, because he really means it. And at the last minute, somebody called the FBI, and then Colonel Tom is the one who got him to see the error in his ways and have it done with. And then Elvis, of course, was like, no, I never meant it in the first place. Thank God he didn't go through with this. Also, there's a story about Colonel Tom is the reason that Elvis is the reason through Colonel Tom that John Lennon was able to stay in the country. Now, obviously, there are things about that with COINTELPRO and and John Lennon and all this stuff. But remember when John Lennon's visa was going to be nuked by the FBI because of his un-American activities, right, in the 60s, and apparently he reached out to Elvis as the one to get him to be able to stay. But with Mike Stone, that was also tied in with the fact that this was at the beginning of the public threats of assassination on cultural figures, and there was a viable threat from the FBI that Elvis had a stalker. Now he's the wrong person to stalk, and here's why. Because the Memphis Mafia, so if people want to understand the Memphis Mafia, there was a time when Elvis met Muhammad Ali in Vegas, and it was the only time that Elvis met somebody that was comparable to him in terms of levels of fame and with an entourage. And there was a tense moment where they met up, and the two stars hadn't met yet, but the two groups met. And these guys that he had around him were hard Southern, ready to do anything for him guys that did do violence at times. They bought him drugs, they bought him guns. They were not like to be messed around with. And what happened was Elvis heard about the threat from the stalker, and the threat said that the guy was going to shoot him at a concert. So all the Memphis Mafia had guns. They all carried guns anyway, but Elvis carried Derringers in each boot, and he had a 38 in his jumpsuit belt. And a guy during one concert rushed the stage when all the women would go up and get the scarves and stuff. And a guy rushed the stage, and Elvis karate chopped the guy. And then Sonny and Red West took the guy and roughed him up very badly. And they learned that was just a regular guy. And then the thing never materialized. But he was ready to kill this guy if he rushed the stage, on stage he was like, I'm going to shoot this bastard with a Derringer.
Yeah. Yes. That happened in Vegas. They got some threats. They were on high alert a couple times in Vegas. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was the end of the book. Was there anything else we want to talk about the movie? So maybe we can do this next time because it's going on 3 hours.
We'll do another part with Elvis, and we'll talk about the other books, and I'll talk about some of these things here. I'll just give you a preview. Okay. This is a magazine I got when I was in Northern Ireland, and this was at the start of a kind of rejuvenation in Elvis's career. And
Mojo.
It says it's Mojo magazine, and it says pills, death threats, deep soul, Elvis. It's the best magazine cover I've ever seen. Look at it. And this kind of went in hard into Elvis. Elvis's career was rejuvenated weirdly with David Holmes, who did from Belfast, who did the soundtrack for the movie Ocean's 11. And A Little Less Conversation started off this rejuvenation in Elvis's career. And Elvis is one of the highest earners even today of dead celebrities. And ironically, that's because of Lisa Marie. So when Elvis died, Lisa Marie ended up taking control of Elvis Presley Enterprises and, taking control because Colonel Tom was done. So she took control of all the merchandising and all of the tours and all the money and all the royalties and all the ownership and the soundtracks. And so now it's a money-making machine. But at the time Elvis died, he was almost in debt. He had almost nothing because of everything that he spent, and because Colonel Tom was, I think, bleeding him dry. But I think that's one of the great ironies, right? That he divorces her and that she ends up saving his posthumous life while at the same time alienating. Did I say Lisa Marie again?
Yeah, you mean Priscilla?
God, what is wrong with me? I keep saying Lisa Marie instead of Priscilla. I meant Priscilla. I've probably been listen. If I've been saying Lisa Marie the whole time instead of Priscilla, I'm sorry. Priscilla is the wife. Lisa Marie is the daughter. Folks at home, I hope you forgive me for that. I guess Lisa Marie's on my mind because of all those terrible things.
Yeah, I was looking up some of their stuff in Scientology too. So maybe next time we can talk about how she fought the Scientologists. Lisa Marie did.
Right. Lisa Marie, not Priscilla.
Right.
Yes. All right. So look, shouts out to Pim, who drops $20 and says, great stream. Love your impersonations. Long live the king on Dono Chat. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Let's see. Shouts out to Jason, who drops $5 on PayPal. Thank you so much. We went through the other super chat. Let me go through the super chats on YouTube. Hopefully it won't freeze up while I'm doing this. Nope. Nope. That didn't work. Hold on. Hold on 1 second. Okay. I froze. Hold on 1 second, Jamie. Just stick with me here. Stick with me here 1 second while I go through the super chats.
Someone says, "Rest in peace, Lisa Marie." Yeah.
Yeah.
And her son too, and that's so weird because remember Anna Nicole Smith died mysteriously, and her son died right before her mysteriously.
Yes. Awful, awful. And Riley Keough, Keough, who is a famous actress now. She's good. She's in a lot of movies. She was in that movie, The Lodge, kind of esoteric movie, but she's in Mad Max. They're coming out with another Mad Max, which is, I don't know what to think about that. Furiosa. All right. Shouts out to Rachel Wilson, $4.99. Thank you so much, Rachel. And she said, awesome to see you guys collab again. Jamie, I love you. Priscilla inspired look. Your Priscilla inspired look. So cute. Thank you, Rachel Wilson. Really appreciate that. Okay, guys. And shouts out to Sabrina Fair, who drops $9.99 super chat and says, just showed up late. I will rewind. Thank you both. Hey, thank you, Sabrina. Really appreciate it. All right. So anything you want to end with, Jamie?
This is to be continued because we've got this crazy book to go through. We've got Priscilla and Scientology, and Lisa Marie fights back. So it's Lisa Marie versus Xenu next time.
Oh boy. All right, everybody. So look, make sure you sub to Jamie's. I'm sure everybody here is, but if you're not, make sure you watch Jamie's videos. Make sure you watch our live streams. The Taylor Swift stream last night was awesome. Go back and watch our Peter Pan streams. Jamie goes deep. And also make sure that everybody that you're here again on Thursday night, because Thursday night I will be with our friend David Patrick Harry, Church of the Eternal Logos, going over Bulgakov's The Master and Margarita. A lot of people have been asking for this for a long time. We're going to go deep into this seminal work of literature. Also, make sure you check out my old Elvis stream, Elvis Hurt, and look at Jay and Jamie's stream on Jay's channel. Jay's analysis, Jay Dyer. Make sure you look at his YouTube channel and watch their Elvis stream after they went to Graceland.
Yep.
And saw the Elvis movie. So thank you all very much. That's about it. We good? All right. Yeah. Peace, y'all. Peace. Thanks, everybody. Peace.